Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Valerie Teeman. Valerie Joy Teeman was born on December 31, 1981, in Salem, Virginia, to parents Sarah Jean Sampson Teeman and Jean Allen Harmon. She spent her childhood in Greenville, South Carolina, and graduated from Hampton Park Christian School in 2000. Valerie pursued her passion for beauty by earning a degree in cosmetology from Bob Jones University. Valerie was a bright and friendly person, known for her warm smile and outgoing personality. She had a flair for drama and speech, and was also musically inclined, playing the piano and flute. With her cosmetology skills, Valerie worked in various salons, spas, and pageants. In her personal life, Valerie was in a relationship with Matt Gotcha, whom she met through a mutual friend when she was 22 years old. Although they had distinct personalities, Valerie being outgoing and cheerful, while Matt was more reserved, their differences did not create problems in their relationship. Valerie and Matt got married in 2004 and initially lived happily together in Matt's small house. However, over time, Valerie's parents noticed a change in her behavior. Matt became controlling, restricting Valerie's access to their finances and forcing her to open a separate bank account to have some independence. As time went on, Matt's behavior worsened, and he began to blame Valerie for all their problems. Valerie endured years of emotional pain, but eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. After 10 years of marriage, Valerie and Matt divorced in 2014. Valerie found solace with Luke Teeman, a reliable and loving man who had served in the army for 10 years, including tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Luke helped Valerie overcome her past traumas, and her relatives noticed a marked improvement in her mood. She began to smile and laugh again, returning to her cheerful self. On June 6, 2014, Luke and Valerie got married, starting a new chapter in their lives together. They settled into Luke's parents' house in Fairfield, Maine, while Valerie's parents lived in South Carolina. Luke and Valerie went back to Maine after visiting her family in South Carolina in August 2016. A week after returning to Maine, Luke started chatting with another woman on Facebook. On August 24, 2016, several people saw Luke with this new woman, and that night, they had intimate relations. It appears Valerie found out about Luke's affair. That same night, Valerie tried calling Luke 31 times within 5 hours. The next day, on August 25, 2016, a mutual friend told Valerie that Luke was pursuing other women and claiming they were separated. Valerie sent several messages to this friend, expressing her heartbreak but trusting that God had a plan and that Luke would never find a better partner than her. On August 26, 2016, he moved in with he was having an affair with and told her that Valerie had left him for another man. Valerie, who normally called her parents in South Carolina every week, suddenly stopped responding to their calls and text messages for over a week. Her parents reached out to her boyfriend Luke to ask about her well-being. Luke responded a day later, saying that they were fine and that he loved her. However, 13 days passed and Valerie's parents still couldn't get in touch with Valerie, so they decided to call Luke's father for information. He told them that Valerie had been missing for about 2 weeks and asked what he should do with her belongings. Valeria's father spoke with Luke Teeman, asking why he hadn't reported her missing. Luke claimed Valeria left him for another man and would tell her parents herself. However, her parents were skeptical, as this behavior was uncharacteristic of Valeria, and they believed she would have reached out to them. On September 9, 2016, Valeria's father filed a missing persons report with the Fairfield Police Department. Detectives investigated by visiting Luke's parents' home, where Valerie lived. They spoke with Luke's mother, Laurel Teeman, who claimed no knowledge of their whereabouts. 2 weeks after Valerie's disappearance, Laurel packed up Valerie's belongings in garbage bags, showing apparent indifference to her well-being. The police were searching for Luke Teeman to ask him some questions about Valerie's disappearance, but they couldn't find him. When they finally spoke to him 5 days later, he claimed that he had last seen Valerie 2 weeks prior at a local Walmart. According to Luke, Valerie had stayed in the car while he went shopping, but when he returned, she was gone. Luke said he tried to contact Valerie by phone and text, but she didn't respond. He assumed she had left him for another man, whom he didn't know by name. Luke claimed their marriage was nearing its end and that Valerie had mentioned someone else during a conversation. However, Valerie's family was unaware of anyone other than Luke in her life, casting doubt on his claims. Police sought public help through the media, sharing a photo of Valerie and asking for sightings. Detectives found the situation suspicious, including discarded belongings and Luke Teeman's lack of effort to find his wife, raising questions about his involvement. To verify Luke's story, investigators reviewed Walmart surveillance footage from the day Valerie vanished. However, after examining the CCTV recordings, they found no evidence of Luke, his truck, or Valerie. This discovery indicated Luke had lied, suggesting he was hiding something. Luke's infidelity with Billie Joe was no secret. He admitted to cheating on Valerie, hoping to move on. Billie Joe claimed to know nothing about Valerie's disappearance, thinking Luke was divorced from her. But a local resident approached the police with a disturbing find that Valerie's driver's license in a parking lot near Billie Joe's home. Suspicion grew due to the proximity of the license to Billie Joe's home. It seemed unlikely Valerie would abandon her belongings and ID if she had run off with someone. 10 days after her father's report, Luke repeated his story to News Center, Maine, claiming he didn't find Valerie at Walmart. However, Walmart's CCTV footage contradicted his alibi. On September 20, 2016, detectives obtained a search warrant for Luke's parents' property in Fairfield, where Valerie last lived. Police dogs trained to detect human remains joined the search. Just 5 minutes in, a dog found something suspicious in the woods. Officers dug up a woman's body wrapped in a blanket, along with some unusual items. The investigation found several items near Valerie's body: a bag of potato chips, perfume, sweet tarts, a flannel shirt, and a mason jar with a handwritten note. A wedding ring was discovered later, hidden among the jar's contents of dirt, stems, and twigs. Sergeant Scott Bryant, who found the ring, noted it was larger than his own wedding ring. The handwritten note, which was worn and dirty, stated that it was for his one and only joy, Valerie Flower forever, and that he loved Valerie Joy Tieman. It continued by expressing that she should rest in peace with his heart and Jesus, and that he couldn't wait to see her again. The note was signed Lie Bear, a nickname Luke later explained to the police was used by him in several other notes found in Valerie's purse. These items, including the note and the other evidence, linked Luke to Valerie's death. The body was taken to the forensic medical examiner's office for an autopsy and identification. Unfortunately for Valeria's parent, they had to face the devastating news that the body found behind their house was indeed their daughter Valerie. Not only did Valerie and Luke live in the house, but also Luke's parents and his younger brother, Sam. Detectives searched the property and found landscaping tools belonging to Sam in the barn, which had been used to dig the grave site. A device used to consume an illegal substance was also found in the barn. Investigations revealed Sam's use of a banned substance, previously mentioned by Valerie. Police now suspect Sam's involvement in Valerie's death. A .45 caliber handgun, purchased by Luke in 2015, was found in his parents' bedroom. Luke's parents claimed ignorance, but this is hard to believe. Upon further searches by investigators around the same time of Valerie's burial site discovery, Luke was located alongside his new girlfriend, Billie Joe. Luke Teeman was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. He told investigators that his wife, Valerie, had died almost a month ago, on August 25, from an overdose of illegal substances. However, Luke claimed that he had not informed Valerie's parents about her death because he did not want them to know that she was using illegal substances. According to Luke, he did not call 911 after Valerie's death because he knew it would be pointless, as she was already dead. Instead, he left her body in bed until evening, when it got dark outside. He then wrapped her in a blanket, left a note, and took her to the woods behind their house, where he and his brother, Sam, dug a hole and buried her. Luke claimed that Valerie had not suffered any physical injuries before her death. However, the autopsy results revealed that Luke was lying. No traces of banned substances were found in Valerie's blood, only prescription drugs. Moreover, the autopsy showed that Valerie's cause of death was 2 bullet wounds, one to the head and one to the neck. The ballistics examination revealed that the bullets were fired from a .45 caliber handgun, which matched the gun found in Luke's parents' bedroom during a search. Luke admitted to buying the gun about a year ago, but claimed that he had purchased it for his father. Luke Teeman was accused of killing his 34-year-old wife, Valerie Teeman. During the investigation, the police found no evidence to suggest that his parents or younger brother were involved in the crime. However, Luke claimed that his brother Sam helped him bury Valerie's body. The police disputed this, stating that Sam was not at home at the time of the incident. It remains unclear whether Luke's parents knew about or were involved in Valerie's death, but it is peculiar that they didn't hear the gunshots. The trial against Luke began on April 2, 2018, in Somerset County Superior Court in Skowhegan, Maine. Luke pleaded not guilty, claiming that someone had framed him. He argued that he wouldn't have left incriminating evidence like an engagement ring and a note near the body. However, forensic examinations linked all the items found with Valerie's body to Luke Teeman. A computer forensics expert testified that Valerie's phone was last used on August 25, 2016, the day police believe she died. The detective explained how phone records help investigators track a person's location. Records showed Valerie called Luke 31 times on the day he was with his new girlfriend. Luke only answered the last call, which lasted 13 minutes. Police believe he was home by the time the call ended the next morning. During the trial, Luke's brother Sam testified against him, prompting the defense to question the phone records. Luke initially told police that Sam helped him bury Valerie's body, but Sam denied this in court. Sam had an alibi, working 2 hours away, which his work log supported. Prosecution witnesses painted a picture of the private life of Luke and Valerie. It was revealed that Luke had told police that his PTSD could trigger rages that he would later forget. Court testimony showed that Luke and Valerie regularly used multiple types of illegal substances, and that Luke had claimed he was getting divorced around the time of Valerie's disappearance. The ex-girlfriend of Sam's brother testified about seeing Luke and Valerie use various substances together, despite the image they projected of having a healthy relationship. Members of the evidence response team testified about their findings at the Teeman's home. Luke's defense team quickly objected to some items, including gardening tools found in a shed near the property and a .45 caliber handgun obtained from one of the rooms in the home. Stephen Smith, Teeman's defense attorney, argued that the state assumed the gun and ammo were used by Teeman because they were found in the home. However, he pointed out that they never verified who the items actually belonged to, suggesting that someone else in the house may have had use to them. On the 5th day of the trial, Teeman admitted to changing his story multiple times, stating that he told investigators several different versions to protect his parents. He claimed that the detectives forced him to give false testimony and that he had no motive to take his wife's life. Furthermore, he stated that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the crime scene. Prosecutors presented a strong clue against Luke Teeman, stating that he was the only person who could have harmed Valerie and that all the evidence pointed to his guilt. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before delivering a guilty verdict on May 11, 2018. At the sentencing hearing, Valerie's mother expressed her outrage and grief, stating that Teeman's denial of the crime was appalling and that he deserved a life sentence in prison. Teeman's mother, on the other hand, pleaded with the court to consider her son's entire life and to balance justice with mercy. Teeman became emotional as his parents begged the judge for leniency. His mother, Laurel, explained that her son had changed after serving 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and that she was not using his post-traumatic stress disorder as an excuse, but rather seeking understanding. Ultimately, Teeman was sentenced to 55 years in prison, which was less than the life sentence that Valerie's parents had hoped for. Teeman appealed the decision, but it was unsuccessful. While in prison, he changed his testimony again, but this did not help his case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nathan Pate. On the night of December 1, 2010, Staff Sergeant Nathan Pate was in quite a rush. He was late for duty at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. By strange coincidence, his alarm clock, which never failed to go off, didn't ring that day. Nathan woke up at 11 p.m. and woke up his wife, Michelle. He hurriedly took a shower, said goodbye to his family, then went to the garage. He was about to put on his uniform and start the car when suddenly loud shots rang out from behind him. Pate's children and wife came running at the sound. There, standing on the doorstep, was Nathan, bleeding and staggering from side to side. It was obvious he was about to fall. Michelle felt terrified and rushed toward her husband to help him up, but wasn't in time. The father of the family collapsed onto the floor. Around 11:30 p.m., 911 received a call. "My husband has been shot. He's bleeding. Help him." Mrs. Pate screamed into the phone. The dispatcher quickly explained how to administer first aid. Michelle tried giving artificial respiration to her spouse, but it didn't bring any relief. When rescuers arrived, they took him to the nearest hospital, where doctors did everything possible to save him. However, efforts weren't enough. They couldn't bring the young man back to life. The neck wound proved fatal for 28-year-old Nathan Pate. Upon being informed of her husband's death, Michelle's world shattered into before and after. An exemplary family man and valiant serviceman had been murdered right on his doorstep in Las Vegas. His death caused public outrage. Relatives, acquaintances, and concerned citizens demanded answers from the police. Who could commit such lawlessness? What were their motives? Was justice served? Nathan Joseph Villagomez Payet was born on February 12, 1982, in the village of Tamuning on Guam. Guam, a small island in the Pacific Ocean, is known for its paradisiacal beauty and historical past. Consequently, it is especially popular among tourists. Nathan was born in this amazing region and was fortunate to have a large and loving family. He had 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, Eric, and 1 sister, Carmela. The children were very friendly and helped their parents in everything. Nathan himself stood out from the others as he never caused trouble. He was a caring child at home and a diligent student at school. Nathan was very sociable, so he easily made friends. Brother Eric recalled that there was perhaps no one who did not want to communicate with him. Living near the ocean fostered Nathan's love for swimming from childhood, which later evolved into a passion for surfing. He spent all his free time on the beach, enjoying the sun and life. Nathan met his future wife during his studies at South High School, located in the neighboring town of Santa Rita. Michelle Anant Chuck was attracted to him at first sight. Young people began spending time together daily, and their affection for each other only grew stronger. They never parted. Together they studied at school, prepared for classes, and helped with household chores. Strong teenage friendship soon transformed into tender love. When Michelle was 16 years old, her family faced a terrible grief as her mother passed away. Consequently, Michelle spent all her free time helping her sister Melissa, the eldest of the Chuck family, who took on the role of mother and mistress of the house. Nathan supported her in everything she did and helped look after the younger children. In 2000, after graduation, Nathan decided to propose to Michelle, who happily accepted his proposal. Given their family's financial constraints preventing them from having a wedding ceremony, the couple received blessings from their parents to move in together instead. To earn a living, Nathan got a job as a receptionist at a local hotel. He earned a decent income, and there was enough money. However, like most young people, Nathan and Michelle were ambitious. They envisioned their own home and, soon, their son Dion was born into the Nathan family. Income then became insufficient to meet their expenses, prompting Nathan to consider a job that could offer his family a more secure existence. This aspiration led Nathan to join the Air Force. After graduation, he was assigned to Elmendorf Air Base in Anchorage, Alaska. After some time, the couple's dream came true when they built their own house. It was in this new home that their second child, a daughter named Niara, was born. Nathan saw success in his military career, which helped him fulfill ambitions that he and Michelle had previously been unable to achieve. Finally, 6 years after their engagement, they celebrated with a big wedding. My mom was extremely proud that her youngest son was the first to go out and achieve something, Eric said. In 2006, Nathan was transferred to Davis-Monthan Military Base in Arizona. He received a promotion to weapons loading team leader for the A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft of one of the Essex squadrons. During this time, he also trained in logistics and material management. Nathan definitely loved his job and performed it with dedication and good intentions. He was truly dedicated to his country. In 2007, Nathan and his family moved to Nellis Air Base near Las Vegas, Nevada. There, he took on the role of Assistant Junior Officer in charge of the supply section for maintenance of combat aircraft. Alongside his career progressions came family growth. Soon after moving, Nathan and Michelle welcomed 2 more sons, Dron and David. Michelle fell in love with Las Vegas. She believed it was an ideal place to live. To make her happy, Nathan decided they would settle down there permanently. Nathan selected the most suitable house for a large family, spacious and bright. Additionally, the future family home was conveniently located 30 to 40 minutes from the military base. Nathan made the down payment with his savings. The only task left was to manage the family's income and expenses wisely. Perhaps he could save some money temporarily, at least until Mr. Pat's next prospects materialized. Initially, Michelle was thrilled with her husband's surprise and set about organizing daily life in their new house. However, over time, their demands grew, and the family's expenditures exceeded Nathan's earnings. The joy of purchasing a new house began to diminish. It's well known that financial difficulties can strain relationships, and Nathan and Michelle were no exception. Realizing that the situation needed correction, Nathan enlisted as a volunteer in mid-2009 when the USA was at war with Iraq. His departure lasted 6 months, during which time the family's financial condition improved considerably. Nathan took solace in this improvement. After a short rest at home, Sergeant Pate decided to return to Iraq. While Nathan risked his life abroad, Michelle struggled with anxiety and intrusive thoughts about being alone with 4 children. Accustomed to a certain standard of living, she found it challenging to envision life differently. To distract herself from these worries, Mrs. Pett took a job at a corporate credit card telemarketing firm. Employment brought variety and new acquaintances into her routine and provided Michelle with her own safety net. Michelle didn't rule out starting her own business in the future and actively engaged in self-development by attending a school of aesthetics. Life went on as usual when Nathan was home. When he left, however, Michelle felt bored. The birth of their children, endless travels, and her husband's prolonged service had cooled their relationship significantly. With Nathan away for long periods and Michelle yearning for love and attention, their relationship faced undeniable challenges. She took a lover, who turned out to be her colleague, Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a 31-year-old, good-looking local womanizer. Unfortunately, the man was also devious and dishonest. He had even spent time in 2007 in prison for forgery and attempted theft. Despite his background, Michelle couldn't resist Sweet Rudy, as they jokingly called him behind his back. By the end 2009, Nathan returned home. The distance and the ordeal appeared to have strengthened their family relationship. However, this wasn't actually the case. Michelle was playing a double game. She did not want to lose her husband while having an infatuation on the side. She thus tried hard to please Nathan in every way possible. Nathan was fascinated by the changes in her appearance and character. The children, though, had been growing up without a father for a long time, which negatively impacted their education. Determined not to leave his family again for an extended period, Nathan did not suspect that Michelle's striking changes could be linked to infidelity. His own pure and faithful nature blinded him to this possibility. In Las Vegas, Nathan found a good way to earn more money, double pay by working night shifts and taking up private teaching. He developed training programs for simplified baseball catering to young children. Michelle's pretense didn't hold up for long. Once their standard of living began to fall, her attitude changed entirely, and their problems escalated. By Thanksgiving in 2010, Brother Eric and his wife Veronica visited the young family and immediately sensed tension between them. They had changed beyond recognition. It seemed like all former feelings between Michelle and Nathan had completely vanished. The couple's issues were glaringly obvious. Not just personal, but also financial difficulties were evident from their almost empty pantry and refrigerator. A week later, on December 1, 2010, there was a peculiar communication between Mrs. Pett and Mr. Rodriguez at precisely 11:12 p.m. Michelle received a text message from Michael stating, "Hope you are feeling better." The man wrote, "Van Dyke's contract for tomorrow is almost finalized." 2 minutes later, he sent another text, "If you're not feeling well, let me. I'll give you a couple of days to rest. Remember, I appreciate your help." At 11:19 p.m., Michelle replied, "My husband just recently woke me up. Right now, he is trying to leave the house, but I think he's going to be late today. I'm sorry the contract is giving you so much trouble." A few months before the tragedy, Michelle had decided that she did not want to be with Nathan anymore. However, she also wasn't planning to leave him because she realized that breaking up would only lead to headaches and empty pockets. She thought, "I don't think he will forgive me and support me after the divorce." Michelle believed that alimony would hardly suffice for a normal life. Additionally, Mrs. Pett was aware of her husband's military insurance policy. In the event of his death, payments totaling approximately $6,500 were due to be made to her. These troubling thoughts plagued Michelle's troubled mind until one day she confided in Michael about them. To her surprise, Michael was intrigued by her thoughts. Consequently, the terrible idea from Nathan's former lover transformed into a devious plan. Mr. Rodriguez knew they couldn't execute this plan alone, as it was too complicated. Hence, he enlisted his friend Corey Alexis Hawkins into their criminal scheme. The 33-year-old mercenary had about 9 convictions, each related to theft or fraud. Corey was a hardened criminal and agreed to assist on the condition of a substantial reward. He estimated his participation at $20,000. After much deliberation, Michelle and Michael agreed to his terms. Subsequently, a couple more individuals joined their group: 23-year-old Jessica Austin, Corey's girlfriend, and her friend Shannon. Jessica's friend Shannon was not particularly intelligent. She earned a living by starring in adult films. Shannon was offered 5% of Corey and Jessica's cut for her assistance in the scheme. This lucrative offer quickly enticed her. The initial plan involved shooting Nathan in his Chevrolet Tahoe and then carrying his body in the car to leave it in the parking lot of one of the apartment complexes. Jessica needed to gather the essential items for the criminal act: men's gloves, a car cover, and a fragrance. Shannon's role was to provide Michael with an alibi. She had to confirm that Michael was by her side on the day of the murder, December 1st, 2010. On that day, Michelle felt unwell and deviated from her usual routine by coming home at about 5:30 p.m. Typically, Michelle's classes at beauty school ended late, around 10:40 p.m. Mrs. Pett arrived home just 5 minutes before Nathan left for work on that unfortunate day. Michelle found her husband sleeping on the sofa. She woke him and suggested they go upstairs together. He did not object, and that was their last night as a couple. Nathan, late for work, went downstairs while Michelle was corresponding with Michael. To avoid suspicion, they used code words in their communications. Michael and his accomplice were stationed in a black Cadillac SRX parked near the victim's house. The perpetrators wore latex gloves to avoid leaving any traces. Knowing the sergeant's military training could be advantageous for Nathan, Michael opted for a surprise attack. He approached Nathan from behind and shot him 5 times in the back. Afterward, Michael quickly exited the garage, got into his car, and fled the scene. The perpetrators then retreated to a prearranged location where they burned their clothes in a fireplace and disposed of other evidence. Following this, Michael and Shannon went to a hotel to establish an alibi. Meanwhile, Jessica meticulously cleaned the apartment where they had stayed. Emergency services and police officers arrived at the crime scene and were shocked by what had transpired. The neighborhood where the Pett family resided was typically seen as model territory. Detective Todd Williams initially chose to inspect the shooting scene. He found the garage door unlocked. There was a noticeable odor of iron inside the room. Blood was smeared on the walls and in the traces of it were also visible on the floor. Next to Nathan's uniform were his keys and wallet. Since the valuables were untouched, a robbery-murder was ruled out. After examining the scene, Detective Lori Anderson decided to talk to the victim's wife. Michelle explained what had happened. For some reason, she added that the family was struggling financially. This gave the police some ideas. Maybe Nathan was hiding something from his wife, perhaps a gambling addiction, debts, or an affair on the side. At least that would have cleared up the attack. Besides, all the evidence pointed to Nathan being deliberately set up. The police examined the victim's cell phone. It contained only pictures of his wife and children. This convinced the officers that Mr. Pate was a decent man. The investigation continued. The next step in the search for the perpetrator was to canvass the neighborhood. Statistically speaking, there's always someone who saw or heard something. This was indeed true for Nathan. Some neighbors reported seeing a car parked near the house. The car was driven by a man wearing a brown sweatshirt. After shots were fired, the vehicle immediately drove away. Detectives finally had a lead. Nathan's family was shocked to learn what had happened. They caught the first flight out of Guam, waiting for answers. His mother, Carmelita Payette, cried throughout the journey. The woman couldn't believe her son had died so early in life. When they finally reached Nathan's home, Michelle threw herself into her mother-in-law's arms and then lost consciousness. Nathan's mother sensed something unnatural in her daughter-in-law's reaction. For some reason, it seemed faked. The investigators decided to talk to Mrs. Pate again and asked her about the car witnesses had seen nearby. Unexpectedly, she said her colleague Michael Rodriguez had a similar car. Why Michelle gave out this information remains unclear. Police later determined that Michelle had either inadvertently revealed the truth or that the perpetrator's plan was flawed. Detectives then investigated Michael's identity and found that his criminal record heightened their suspicions. He was brought in for questioning, and he responded calmly. Mr. Rodriguez stated that on the day of Nathan's murder, around 9 p.m., he went shopping at a supermarket. During this outing, he met an interesting woman named Shannon. According to him, they had a lengthy conversation and decided to continue their acquaintance at a hotel room. Michael explained that they arrived at the hotel around 11 p.m. To verify Michael's testimony, the officers contacted Shannon. She did confirm their romantic encounter. However, the detective had a feeling something was amiss. The next logical step was to examine the information found in Michelle's phone. Specialists managed to recover correspondence between Michelle and Michael, spanning over a year. Their communication turned out to be very suspect. On the exact day of Nathan's murder, the couple discussed a contract with someone named Van DJK. The conversation resembled code rather than a straightforward business negotiation. It seemed like how they planned the crime. Investigators were nearly certain both individuals were involved, but lacked sufficient evidence to detain them longer, so they decided to release Michael until more details could be clarified. After examining Michelle's cell phone, detectives called her back for questioning. She appeared visibly agitated and seemed to be withholding information. Realizing that officers knew more than she wanted them to know, Michelle eventually disclosed her affair with Michael. A little later, she confessed that several months before her husband's death, she and her lover had plotted to kill Nathan. The motive behind this action was apparently tied to insurance payments. Mrs. Pett justified herself by stating that she had repented and claimed she changed her mind during one stage of preparing for the crime. She felt sorry for her husband and even tried to interfere with the plan by turning off his alarm clock. Michelle was counting on her accomplice, not waiting for Nathan or missing him. However, the investigators did not believe in the woman's remorse. Her correspondence eloquently testified otherwise. Additionally, she sent Michael a cute smiley face right after she learned of her husband's death. After a while, Shannon came to the police station to confess. The woman must have realized her predicament. Nonetheless, her involvement in the case was clearly embellished. She explained that Michael had forced her to provide an alibi. Jessica asked for my help. Her friends wanted to teach a big drug dealer a lesson. My job was only to cover up the involvement of one of the attackers. I thought it would be a way to get justice, she explained. She then added that on the night of the attack, Michael told her the whole truth. As soon as I realized I was being used, I immediately went to the police. In addition, I feared for my life. There is no telling what they would have done to me. The woman's words were confirmed by the hotel's CCTV footage that showed Michael and Shannon arrived at the hotel not at 11 p.m., as Michael himself said, but at 11:40 p.m. Her testimony led detectives to Corey and Jessica. Corey had long denied any involvement in the case. He knew what a guilty plea would do to a repeat offender, but Jessica did reveal her role in the sinister plan. To honor the young sergeant's memory, Nathan's family and friends gathered on December 7, 2010, in the chapel at Nellis Base. Michelle decided to skip the ceremony. She was clearly not in the mood for it. In his speech, Eric Pate recalled, "My brother has always been an example for me and the rest of my family. Nathan truly loved life. He was devoted to his wife and children. Everything he did was for his homeland, love, and friends." On December 9th, the remains of Nathan were transported to Guam. On December 15th, a requiem mass took place at St. Francis Church in Tamuning. Military honors were paid at the Pi City Cemetery on Guam's island. His funeral? The cortege consisted of 36 motorcycles. 6 officers carried a casket draped with a U.S. flag upon arrival at the burial site. Afterward, 21 shots echoed in the sky as Nathan was given a hero's farewell. Michael Rodriguez, Corey Hawkins, and Jessica Austin were arrested without bail on December 8, 2010. The next day, Michelle Pett met the same fate. Police feared for her mental state and placed her under surveillance to prevent suicide. On January 4, 2011, in Clark County District Court, charges were read to the 4 accomplices: conspiracy to commit murder and robbery with a firearm, murder with a firearm. Additionally, Michael and Corey faced charges for possessing firearms. The trials dragged on for 3 years as some defendants denied involvement. Armed with strong defense teams, they filed multiple motions aiming to exclude certain evidence from the case, yet each motion got rejected. Their strategies only delayed inevitable punishment by postponing sessions repeatedly. On September 21, 2015, the trial for Nathan Pett's murder began. Michael Rudolph Rodriguez stood trial first and pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. On September 29, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. An appeal against this sentence got denied later. At sentencing time, Michael showed no emotion or regret for his crime. Michelle Payer's trial happened 1 month later in a Las Vegas courtroom, a stark contrast as she insisted that she had reconsidered killing her husband. When the judge permitted Michelle to speak a few words in her defense, turned to the parents of the murdered man. With tears in her eyes, she apologized them. "I loved Nathan and our children. I was very confused and made a big mistake," Michelle stated, then fainted once again. The prosecutor asserted that she did not believe the defendant intended to thwart the conspiracy, citing considerable evidence to the contrary. It baffled everyone how a woman, a mother of 4 children, could become so cold-blooded. The judge sided with the prosecution, determining that Michelle was clearly more involved in the crime than she admitted in court. Michelle soon pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a firearm. This plea helped her avoid capital punishment. The Pett family also requested that the court not impose the death penalty on their former relative. At the end of the hearing, the judge described Michelle's crime as incomprehensible and unfathomable. In October 2015, it was Corey Alexis Hawkins' turn in court. He also agreed to a plea bargain to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison. His attorney's petition for parole was denied because Corey had helped plan the crime and was present at the time of the shooting. Jessica Austin likewise took a plea deal with prosecutors and later faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder. In March 2016, during Michelle's final sentencing, she cited her unstable emotional state as leading her to commit the crime once more and asked Nathan's family for forgiveness again. Carmelita Pete, who was deeply religious, recognized that her former daughter-in-law felt genuine remorse for her actions and believed that Michelle's soul needed forgiveness. Thus, Nathan's mother forgave Michelle in the courtroom. She added afterward that Michelle had already endured substantial punishment by losing contact with her children, who feared their mother might harm them too. Erichet informed her of this perspective. He believed Michelle was deeply shaken by her mother-in-law's words. Her family is now moving on without her, and the children will up knowing their mother is a murderer. Eric's wife, Veronica, also felt the need to speak out. She told Michelle that she hated her and then added that Michelle dishonored the family name with her greed and love for a man she barely knew. Michelle had destroyed her own family. She became the murderer of the man she once loved immensely, with whom she shared a home and future. Could Michelle have ever imagined how her unchecked ambition would turn out? Hardly. People in this category often live in a perpetual pursuit of happiness without appreciating what they already have. Nathan, unlike Michelle, spent his whole life giving selflessly. Despite being sleep-deprived and risking his health and life, he fulfilled his beloved's dreams, yet never found recognition from her. The children of the Pett family will remain traumatized for life. It's doubtful they will be able to create strong families or socialize effectively. The painful experience of their parents' predicament will stay before their eyes forever. Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Savannah Graywind. On the morning of Saturday, August 19, 2017, Norberta Graywind watched her 22-year-old pregnant daughter Savannah struggle up the stairs to their third-floor apartment. It was a hot day, and Savannah, who was 8 months pregnant, could barely walk on her swollen legs. A few hours later, William Ho, the boyfriend of Brooke Cruz, the same neighbor who had invited Savannah over, entered the apartment. Inside, he found Brooke scrubbing the bathroom. Savannah's bloody body lay on the floor. There was also a basin with a baby in it on top of the toilet lid. When William saw this, Brooke held out the infant to him and said, "This is our baby. This is our family. Please help me." In a move that defied all logic, William helped clean up the blood. He carried bags of bloody towels and clothes out of the apartment. They wrapped bags around Savannah's body, securing them with duct tape and ropes before later disposing of her corpse. Broken families and death marked this tragic event, coinciding with a birth. William Hone told his co-workers that his spouse had given birth to a little girl named Phoenix the day after these events took place. In an ironic twist, the couple who took Savannah's life also named her daughter after a mythological bird known for dying and being reborn. In an interview later on, Brooke's boyfriend described his short days with Heisley Joe, the name given by her family, as beautiful days. He remarked how that baby made him feel like part of a happy little family for just 2 days. Savannah Graywind was born on August 9, 1995, in Burke County, North Dakota. Her father is an ordinary white American, while her mother belongs to the Spirit Lake Sioux Indian tribe. Including herself, she had 2 brothers, Joy and Casey, and a younger sister named Kayla. Norberta and Joe, Savannah's parents, were always very proud of their children. The family resided in Fargo, North Dakota until Savannah turned 9 years old. In 200, they relocated to Spirit Lake Reservation. This place, located in the eastern part of the state, is a Native American Indian area. Savannah had a deep love for nature and animals, particularly horses. It was on the reservation that she met Ashton Mound. The pair first crossed paths when Savannah was 15 years old and remained inseparable ever since. When it became time for college, her family moved back to Fargo. Savannah found employment caring for the elderly at a nursing home while studying to become a nurse. She was preparing to sit for her exam in September. By this period, Savannah was an expectant mother with her first child on the way. She and Ashton secured an apartment by putting down a deposit and planned to move into their new home in early September. For now, she stayed with her parents on the bottom floor of a 7-unit, 3-story apartment building. In this same building, on the 3rd floor, resided Brooke Cruz, 38 years old, and William Hone, 33 years old. It is often said that no one is born evil. Rather, individuals are shaped by their experiences. Brooke Cruz cultivated within herself aspects capable of committing heinous acts of murder as she sought completeness by embracing all facets of her personality, including darker ones beyond her control. Drawn to mysticism since childhood, Brooke found a peculiar allure in crimes perpetrated by serial killers and high IQ maniacs. As an adult, she professionally delved into criminal psychology to understand their mindset better. Brooke Cruz, the personality, which was characterized by impulsive behavior, anxious avoidance, and irascibility. By the time she reached 38, she was overwhelmed by depression, physical illness, and exhaustion from unhealthy relationships that included regular physical abuse further compounded her troubles. A disturbing fear of losing her partner because she couldn't conceive added to her stress. Brooke couldn't take it anymore. Darkness mingled within her mind. Killing a pregnant woman was seen by her as one way to get the infant she so desperately wanted. After her arrest, Brooke's apartment revealed much about her state of mind. It contained a stack of books on topics ranging from clinical criminal forensic and legal psychology to obstetrics. In a desk drawer were notes listing birthing kit items such as scissors, blades, clamps, and gloves, an infant cardiopulmonary resuscitation bag, and the hormone oxytocin. Brooklyn Cruz grew up in Florida's Bradenton, Sarasota neighborhood. Her parents divorced, leaving 7 children, including Brooke, to live with their mother. Recollections from one sister described their family life as quite good. However, diary entries kept by Brooke throughout later life painted a different picture, depicting a difficult childhood she struggled to forget. As she aged out of adolescence, Brooke's once caring and open-minded demeanor changed significantly. She became testy, but not aggressive, a troubled teenager among siblings who chose to stay with their father instead of their mother, who referred to him as a professional criminal. Life with her father didn't pan out well either. She subsequently found herself moving in and out of foster homes. From that point onward, the siblings lost touch with Brooke. They only learned that Brooke is the mother of at least 7 children through news coverage related to a shocking crime. At the age of 15, Brooke met Aaron Edwards. In 1995, when she was about 17, she gave birth to a child in County, Florida. She left the infant with the father and moved away. A court ordered her to pay child support, but Brooke did not honor the court order. She remembered her daughter when she turned 14. Their communication was limited to a few Facebook messages in the evenings. Brooke worked as a waitress at the Chinese Dragon restaurant and as a sales representative and animal specialist at Petland Pet Store in Bradenton, Florida. In early 2002, at age 23, Brooke was jailed in Missouri for falsifying documents but was released on parole on August 31, 2002. However, she was arrested again and sent to jail in Hidalgo County, Texas, for a parole violation. In 2006, at age 27, Brooke married Carl Cruz, a carpenter from Minnesota. During their marriage, she gave birth to 2 children and worked as an administrative assistant in her husband's carpentry shop. Unfortunately, the marriage lasted only 3 years due to infidelity on her part. They divorced in June 2009. According to documents, custody of the children went to Carl. Brooke then moved to California without explanation. Throughout her life, one consistent activity for Brooke was keeping diaries and recording events meticulously. After a tragic event, these entries became public. The diaries revealed numerous romantic relationships marked by initial enthusiasm, heart-shaped marks around the edges. She returned to her now ex-husband's house after a trip to California. She registered on a dating site and began to study psychology in earnest. On the dating site tagged, the young woman met Andrew Murray, a chef from Katoomba, New South Wales, Australia. She decided to move to Australia in late 2011. In January 2012, an argument erupted over a child custody issue. During this conflict, Brooke grabbed a knife and attacked her ex-husband. Police arrested her and filed criminal charges. Brooke denied the knife attack, but chose not to wait for a court hearing. Instead, she fled to Australia using false immigration papers and married Andrew. This Australian marriage lasted exactly 6 months. Andrew discovered her American past, including her husband, children, and fake immigration papers. After uncovering these truths, his wife, according to Andrew, began threatening him with arrest for aiding and abetting. This led Andrew to go to the police himself and disclose everything just in case. Andrew recalled their marriage as being filled with conversations about maniacs. He later revealed that as early as 2012, Brooke was already obsessed with crime. She studied psychology and nursing and did her thesis on serial killers. From her words, she was always reading books about maniacs and crime and could tell you anything about them. Andrew observed that over time, Brooke became increasingly aggressive. It took 6 months and 10 days from her arrival until she returned to the U.S. in October 2012. On September 22, 2012, Brooke made a diary entry noting that she had changed significantly for the better after returning from Australia. She engaged in a lengthy custody battle for her 2 children. She might have had a chance for a new life if she reconciled with Andrew Murray, but instead met William Hone in late 2012. William Hone had been convicted of child abuse months earlier after bringing his son to the hospital with a fractured skull near his right ear in January 2011. Brooke fell in love with this man who was twice divorced, had 2 kids, didn't pay child support, had anger issues, and was under a court order for no contact with his children. Brooke was full of energy and desire for change, aiming to be her new self, take care of the kids, and move forward positively, and found herself employment. In 2013, Brooke transformed a hobby into a profession by enrolling at Minnesota State University in Moorhead. There, she took courses like social behavior, physiological psychology, cognitive theory, psychology of deviant behavior, and directed research. She had a keen interest in the psychology of serial killers. Initially, her relationship with William was wonderful. However, over time, the relationship turned codependent with joint use of alcohol and illegal substances. Brooke believed she was controlling well, but felt progressively worse. She began avoiding her children, changed jobs due to conflicts with staff, and became more engrossed in her psychological research into humanity's darker sides. On December 23, 2014, she lost her custody battle. Judge Waldemar of the Otter Tail County Courthouse granted temporary sole physical and legal custody of the children to their father, Carl. That same day, Brooke suffered a panic attack and was taken to the hospital emergency room with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, according to medical records. Years later, during her trial for murder, she would state that the events in 2014 marked a turning point in her life when she lost the ability to control her impulses and evaluate her actions clearly. though she did not specify what those events were. In January 2015, an entry appeared in her diary stating, "I feel like I started this relationship with a purse full of love coins, and slowly but surely, this purse is empty, and I just have nothing to give." She expressed that their intimacy wasn't the same as before. "About once a week he makes time for me. The intimacy lasts about 7 to 15 minutes. He doesn't care at all about my satisfaction." Brooke complained of his inattentiveness and became increasingly withdrawn. 5 months later, she was diagnosed with gallbladder disease. Physical and psychological deterioration set in. Brooke practically stopped leaving the house. In May 2016, police responded to a call. William Hahn had brutally beaten his girlfriend in the bathroom. He pleaded guilty to assault and was banned from approaching Brooke. 6 months later, police came again on a neighbor's call and found Hahn in Brooke's apartment. He pleaded guilty to violating the restraining order. They backed together after this, but a healthy moment never returned to their relationship. Brooke was unable to have children after an abortion in 2011. William, however, constantly demanded a child from her. In early 2017, after another fight, Brooke lied to Hahn about being pregnant to prevent him from leaving. She even emailed him a fake ultrasound picture and a photo of a positive pregnancy test. She found a recording of some random baby's heartbeat online and showed it to her partner, claiming it was their future child's heartbeat. By August 2017, they had another big fight. It became obvious there was no pregnancy. Since William had already told everyone about his future paternity and did not want to appear foolish, he literally demanded a child from his girlfriend. He mentioned the pregnant neighbor living 3 floors below them. Brooke Cruz later told police officers that she took William's demand as an ultimatum and believed he desired to take the baby away from Savannah, though this wasn't directly stated by him. Brooke had medical knowledge and began compiling a list of what she needed to induce labor. She anticipated and did whatever her young lover wanted her to do. On a Saturday afternoon in August, Brooke knocked on the door of a downstairs apartment and offered Savannah $20 for serving as a model for a dress Brooke was supposedly sewing. Savannah accepted before going upstairs to her neighbor's apartment. Before heading up, Savannah ordered pizza, expecting to have some when she got home later on that day. An hour later, with the plan to drive her younger brother to work, Savannah's mother did not return on time. Her brother decided to go upstairs by himself around 2:30 in the afternoon. He heard the hum of a sewing machine, but received no response at the door. A few minutes later, Savannah's father, Joe, also went upstairs and knocked. Brooke responded that they were still working on the dress and Savannah was trying it on, hence why no one could open the door. Meanwhile, Norberta drove her son to work herself. Upon returning home, she found an untouched pizza. Concerned, she texted her daughter several times. Getting no reply, she went upstairs. A neighbor mentioned that Savannah had left soon after completing their fitting. Worried, Norberta went back to her apartment and observed all of Savannah's personal items. Shoes, purse, car keys were still there. Given Savannah's condition and discomfort caused by heat and swelling, it was unlikely she had gone for a walk. Norberta called Ashton to check if he had picked up their daughter. To her dismay, Ashton said Savannah wasn't responding to him either. Increasingly anxious, Norberta contacted the police and drove around looking for her pregnant daughter, who might have taken ill suddenly. While driving around, Norberta theorized that if Savannah had gone somewhere nearby, she would have seen signs of her. However, an uneasy feeling suggested otherwise. Later that day, police searched Brooke and William's apartment since it was Savannah's last known location. The landlord allowed entry and cooperated fully. However, without a warrant, police did not search more thoroughly into closets or behind closed doors. The police informed the family that since Savannah was an adult capable of making her own decisions without informing them, and because there was no apparent crime evidence at or near home, the initial investigation concluded that she had left voluntarily. Savannah's family perceived this approach as indifferent and found it deeply upsetting. Police returned 2 more times for subsequent searches, but were unsuccessful in finding any additional information or clues regarding Savannah's whereabouts. William Hahn later testified during one of these searches as part of the ongoing investigation process. On August 23, 2017, William's colleagues informed law enforcement that he had boasted about having an infant at home. That same day, residents of the apartment complex reported hearing a baby crying from apartment number 5 and immediately alerted the police. This information enabled officers to secure a warrant and return to the familiar apartment for a comprehensive search. During this search, a newborn baby girl was found alive. Brooke divulged that Savannah herself had given her the baby 2 days after her disappearance. According to Brooke, Savannah did not want to keep the baby and had come over originally to assist with sewing a dress. On that day, she inquired how she could induce labor herself. She then left only to reappear 2 days later at 3 a.m. with the baby in her arms and handed her to Brooke. The couple was subsequently arrested, and Savannah was officially reported missing. The infant was taken to a local hospital and placed in temporary custody of Cass County Social Services. A few days later, DNA testing confirmed parentage, and she was reunited with her father. For 3 additional days, police and numerous local residents scoured the valley in search of Savannah. Chief Todd urged property owners and landlords to inspect their properties, buildings, garages, outbuildings, and vacant apartments for any signs of intrusion or other indications that someone might have been there. On August 27th, 8 days after Savannah's disappearance, a fisherman discovered a body wrapped in plastic along the Red River near Harwood. The body was identified as Savannah through a distinctive tattoo on her leg that read, "Too beautiful for Earth." On August 28th, Brooke Cruz and William Hahn were formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to kidnap, and providing false information to police authorities. The couple began to talk. Brooke stated she initiated the altercation by accusing pregnant Savannah of stealing mail and mistreating her cat. The verbal argument escalated into a physical confrontation. Brooke pushed Savannah, causing her to fall and hit her head on bathroom sink, leading to loss of consciousness. Brooke then used a knife to perform an incision from hip to hip and removed the baby. Savannah drifted in and out of consciousness during this procedure. Under questioning, Brooke confirmed that William Hahn was unaware of the impending plan. According to her, when William arrived home, he entered the bathroom, saw Savannah, and inquired if she was alive. Brooke responded that she did not know and sought assistance. William briefly left the bathroom and returned holding a rope with which he strangled Savannah. Next, Brooke said they cleaned the floor and walls, then placed Savannah's body into a bathroom closet. When law enforcement arrived at their door, Brooke attempted to remain composed. The officers conducted a superficial search of the apartment without a warrant. Therefore, they couldn't inspect closets or dressers thoroughly. During these searches, according to the perpetrator, the infant was concealed under a blanket on their bed next to William. The child remained very calm and did not cry, thus avoiding detection at that time. By August 20th's third inspection, Savannah's body had already been moved into a dresser while the infant was hidden in a suitcase. In the early hours of August 21st, they transported the dresser downstairs and loaded it into their Jeep Cherokee to dispose of it by the river. William Hahn denied participating in the crime itself, but admitted only to hiding the newborn baby girl and providing false information to law enforcement in an attempt to cover up related activities. Both Brooke and William were assigned bail set at $2 million each, an amount William described as unrealistic and unreasonable for any ordinary individual. Brooke Cruz a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. William's involvement in the crime wasn't proven during the trial. Additionally, it came to light that Brooke's cellmate, Jennifer Robinson, testified against her. According to Jennifer, Brooke disclosed that she strangled Savannah with a rope because she discovered Savannah's affair with William and suspected that Savannah's child might have been his. On September 28, 2018, a jury acquitted William of conspiracy to commit murder. However, on October 30th, 2018, after pleading guilty to kidnapping, he received a life sentence in prison. The following spring, in May 2019, William appealed to the Supreme Court. By October 7, 2019, at the sentencing review trial, Judge Olin, who initially sentenced William, indicated that despite the Supreme Court's dissent, he would still impose the harshest possible sentence at that time, 20 years in prison. Considering William had already spent 775 days behind bars by then, he must serve over 7 more years of his 20-year sentence. Baby Hazel remained unharmed despite such an unnatural delivery and is now 6 years old and attending kindergarten. Savannah's parents and the girl's father share joint custody. The grandparents manage a public Facebook page where they post updates about their granddaughter's well-being and activities. The case has gained significant attention, with Norberta being adamant that her daughter's disappearance wasn't taken seriously because Savannah was Native American. She commented on how different it would have been if a white woman had disappeared. "I've lived in Fargo almost my whole life and seen how differently Native Americans are treated." Following Savannah's death, Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp introduced Savannah's Law, which was signed into law in October 2020. This law aims to combat violence against Native American women by enhancing collaboration between federal, state, and tribal authorities. Norberta remarked on the law's passage, "It's sad that my daughter had to die for people to take Native Americans seriously." This narrative revolves around a woman whose life was marred by deception from the start. Today, we discuss the tragic consequences of a shameless liar's pursuit of significant wealth and the numerous lives it can impact. Michelle grew up in Hurst, a suburb of Dallas, Texas, alongside her younger sister, Laura. Their mother left in search of better opportunities, leaving their father to raise them. Managing 2 daughters alone was challenging for him. He supported them through various odd jobs at construction sites and frequently consumed alcohol. In his quest for easy money, he resorted to illegal schemes. He worked at different factories and intentionally injured himself to receive insurance compensation. This fraudulent scheme worked temporarily, but eventually got exposed by security cameras at one factory, resulting in his arrest. Michelle learned how to lie and manipulate as part of her everyday life. She yearned to escape her circumstances, but couldn't break free from her ingrained habit of lying. It had become an integral part of her existence. She aspired to grow up and leave poverty behind. At 15, Michelle was very attractive, a petite brown-haired girl with an athletic build who gained popularity among boys, both her age and older. Recognizing that her beauty and charm could be powerful tools, she began manipulating men to get what she wanted, starting a series of relationships. At 17, Michelle dropped out of school and married 16-year-old Kenneth O'Brien after convincing him she was pregnant. Kenneth joined the Army, assuming full responsibility for his young wife and their supposed unborn child. The couple moved frequently due to military assignments. They had 2 children together. However, temporary military housing was far from what Michelle desired for her life. Dissatisfied with such an existence, she left Kenneth after 5 years. She spread false claims that the reason for leaving him was abuse and infidelity on his part. After returning to Hurst, Michelle portrayed herself as a victim of domestic abuse in front of her relatives and friends. She received the essential support and began to rebuild her life. Sometime, she started dating Brandon, a former classmate. Deeply in love with Michelle, Brandon accepted her 3 children. The couple prepared for their wedding. However, Brandon discovered that Michelle was still married to her first husband. She'd been too afraid to initiate the divorce due to the abuse she claimed to have faced, hence never sent the papers. With legal assistance, they quickly resolved the issue and married in 1994. Initially, family life was pleasant. Brandon focused on building his IT company, while Michelle worked as a dental assistant. However, a quiet family life did not fulfill Michelle's aspirations. She desired more. She began bringing home various dental equipment and stealing money. Brandon sensed something amiss. Eventually, Michelle was caught in the act of theft. Through sheer luck, she avoided trial, but Brandon's trust in her was shattered. Neighbors informed Brandon that numerous cars were seen at their house during his absence. Consequently, he installed voice recorders throughout their home and uncovered the presence of various men visiting during the day. Brandon conducted an investigation and discovered that Michelle's first marriage ended due to her infidelity, not because of her husband's abusive behavior, as she had claimed. His patience exhausted, he demanded a divorce. Enraged by this decision, Michelle sought revenge while Brandon was at work. Brandon recounted an incident where she destroyed his aquarium worth thousands by pouring Comet into it, killing all the fish inside. Additionally, she poisoned his dog Domino with sleeping pills. These acts marked just the start of further turmoil for Brandon. In the unfortunate conclusion to their marriage, it became clear that Michelle's actions with other men were far worse than anything she'd done with Brandon. It emerged that John Paul Ray, another student from Hearst High School, was actually the father of her first child. Instead of informing John Paul Ray about this fact, Michelle convinced Kenneth O'Brien that he was the father, which led him to marry her and believe for 13 years that their eldest son was his biological child. Brando later informed the police that Kenneth had been paying child support for a child he believed was his, unaware of the truth. After Brandon and Michelle divorced, Michelle moved in with John, her first child's father. They lived together in a civil marriage for 8 years. Their relationship ended when Brando began to suspect infidelity. Michelle did not deny her affair, she admitted it. Brandon relocated, leaving most of their property to Michelle. Michelle's next relationship was with Greg Williams. Both had experience from failed marriages. Greg had been married twice and had a daughter. Following his 2003 divorce from Katie, they amicably decided on joint custody for their daughter Taylor without an official alimony agreement due to their good terms. Greg was affluent, successful, and generous, traits that made him ideal for Michelle. In 2007, Greg and Michelle welcomed a daughter named Michaela and got married the following year. Their marriage embodied the American dream: financial stability, children, and love. Everything Michelle had wished for. It appeared Michelle's perseverance led her to achieve her dreams. Greg Williams held his family in high regard. Growing up in a disciplined household, he was self-made from a young age. Passionate about sports and holding a black belt in martial arts, Greg also had an interest in firearms. Both he and Michelle kept guns at home. While Michelle stored her silver .40 caliber gun securely in a safe, Greg kept his black Les Baer .45 caliber gun loaded under the bedside table. Together, the couple aimed to build a happy and fulfilling marriage. Michelle and Greg often hosted birthday parties for their children from previous marriages. Michelle's adult children frequently gathered for barbecues and enjoyed swimming in the pool. Their house was always bustling with friends and family. Yet despite their beautiful suburban home, Greg and Michelle were not a typical American couple. They had met through a BDSM website and discussed topics like domination, sadism, and masochism. Their vibrant house parties often led to numerous complaints from neighbors. To avoid further issues, the couple decided to relocate without making their decision public. The night before the move, both Michelle and Greg found it difficult to sleep. They were preparing to purchase a new house for $4.5 million and spent a lot of time discussing this significant purchase. Eventually, Greg stayed alone in the bedroom while Michelle went to comfort her crying daughter and fell asleep beside her. On October 13, 2011, at 4:40 a.m., the police received an urgent call from Michelle. She tearfully reported that she and her husband had been attacked by an intruder who wounded her and shot her husband. Police arrived at the scene within minutes. Inside the house, they found a television turned on and a child sleeping undisturbed on the couch. It was Michelle's daughter, who seemed entirely unharmed by the incident. Observing Michelle closely, officers noted that her behavior appeared unusual for someone who had just experienced a home invasion. Soon, the street swarmed with police cars, detectives, and criminologists. The area got closed off, and officers searched every inch of the house. Michelle was fully dressed, her hair styled neatly, and she behaved quite calmly. She claimed to have been asleep, yet her attire and demeanor appeared otherwise. As the sole witness, Michelle was taken to the police station for questioning. After several of speaking with the police, Michelle's testimony began to falter. According to her account, an attacker dressed in all black struck her on the head with a wrench. She fell to the ground but remained conscious and heard a shot. Then, she said, the stranger exited through the back door. However, Michelle Williams' narrative did not align with what detectives observed at the crime scene. Greg Williams had been shot in the head while lying in bed. A .45 caliber gun, supposedly used by the assailant, was found near the back door along with a wrench. Neither had fingerprints. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry. Valuables like jewelry and money were left untouched. Footage from a neighbor's security camera showed only one car entering the closed area around their house a few hours before the incident. The police confirmed it belonged to a delivery boy. In an attempt to mislead investigators, Michelle concocted her own version of events. She claimed to have hit herself with a wrench and staged the scene as if it were a break-in. Yet detectives conducted thorough investigations and identified several inconsistencies. Michelle was fully dressed, her hair styled and makeup applied, suggesting that she might have been expecting someone. The firearm was discovered inside the residence. However, there were no fingerprints found. A critical piece of evidence contradicting Michelle's statement was $20,000 in cash, which remained untouched. Michelle could not provide a reason for why a successful businessman and dedicated father would decide to end his own life, but she did offer an explanation for her actions. Michelle asserted that her motive was to protect their young daughter from the harsh reality of her father's death. She admitted to law enforcement that she wiped the firearm clean and washed Greg's hands to remove any fingerprints. Following this, she staged a break-in at the residence and alerted authorities. While this account seemed unusual, it shed light on why there was an absence of evidence at the scene. Michelle confessed to sanitizing the crime scene with bleach and inflicting injuries on herself using a wrench from the onset. The police held reservations about the reliability of Michelle's testimony, yet at that time there wasn't any physical evidence linking her to the crime. Michelle faced arrest for providing false evidence, but was released shortly after. At about 5 p.m. on the day the crime occurred, Michelle visited her sister Laura's house. She didn't bring up Greg's name. During questioning by the police, her sister Laura shared, Michelle cried now and then, but did not seem genuine. Strangely, the next morning, Michelle woke up in excellent spirits. She dressed impeccably and did her hair and makeup. She seemed cheerful as she went to a well-known restaurant for breakfast, where she ordered pancakes with syrup. While law enforcement probed the theory that Greg might have taken his own life and sought motives and evidence, Michelle inadvertently revealed both motive and evidence of her involvement. Reviewing documents from the initial interrogation, officers noted a crucial point. Although Michelle claimed indifference toward money, her behavior suggested otherwise. After Greg passed, Michelle began withdrawing funds from family accounts rapidly and spent significant amounts of money. She processed these withdrawals through Greg's IT company. The specific amounts aren't disclosed publicly, but were presumed substantial. Following the proceeds from selling a frozen yogurt store in Keller, Michelle made a critical error when she reached out to the insurance company aiming to claim Greg's life insurance payout. Michelle was the sole beneficiary of Greg's life insurance policy, issued on August 12, 2011, just before the crime occurred. Despite this, she overlooked a crucial detail. The terms of the insurance excluded coverage for deaths by suicide. Consequently, Michelle's claim for the $600,000 insurance payout was denied. This denial became the primary motive behind the crime. Subsequently, another instance of fraud came to light. Michelle had used falsified financial documents to secure mortgage loans for a house they intended to purchase together. Account numbers were deliberately altered, and these modifications went unnoticed by the lender. Following Greg's death, Michelle canceled an appointment with the mortgage company, resulting in the fraudulent account not being examined until it drew police attention. In fact, to add further intrigue, shortly thereafter, Michelle issued a check for $188,000 to her attorney Kenneth Wycorn and embarked on a week-long vacation to Grapevine with her children. The investigation extended over 3 months and meticulously dismantled all of Michelle's fabrications. The autopsy revealed that Greg had been shot from a distance ranging from 12 to 18 inches. Additionally, toxicological findings indicated that Greg had a significant quantity of sleeping pills in his system at the time of death. It was also determined that there was no evidence of a burglary. The comprehensive police investigation thus unmasked the true circumstances surrounding Greg's demise and exposed Michelle's deceitful actions. Mrs. Williams administered drugs to her husband and then shot him from a distance of 1 after increasing the volume of the television. Michelle's daughter, who was asleep in her room, did not hear anything. On November 3, 2011, based on the medical examiner's findings, Greg Williams' death was officially classified as a homicide. Michelle Williams was apprehended on January 9th while on her way to a fitness center. She faced charges of murder, evidence tampering, and providing false testimony to the police. She was both the sole witness to the crime and the primary suspect. Her bail was initially set at $522,000 for release from custody, but she was eventually released on $85,000 bail after spending a week in detention. Leaving the prison dressed in sportswear, Michelle wore an ankle monitor and was accompanied by Kenneth Wycorn, who formally represented her legal interests. Greg's first wife, Katie, expressed intense frustration upon discovering that Wycorn was defending Michelle. The funds used for his fees were part of Greg's estate and should never have been allocated towards the expenses of someone accused of his murder. Court records indicate Kenneth Wycorn served as Katie and Greg's divorce attorney. His name and signature appeared in legal documents related to their daughter Taylor's custody agreement in 2008. Wycorn defended his involvement by clarifying that while his firm oversaw the divorce proceedings, he never directly represented Greg's interest personally. According to Wycorn, he learned about the crime through an IT company employee. "It was very shocking," he remarked, and added that Michelle later requested his assistance. After her attempt to benefit financially from Greg's death failed, Michelle Williams adopted the name Shelley and sought a fresh start as a fitness guru, publicly announcing her relationship with Gene Wallace, who was nearly 15 years her junior and a friend of her eldest son. On Facebook, Shelley actively promoted their new fitness club in Bedford online. Over subsequent months, she wore an ankle monitor while enjoying time with her new boyfriend, participating in fitness classes and attending court sessions. Often dressing for court in miniskirts, knee-high boots, and low-cut blouses suggested little sign of mourning for Greg, according to Katie, Greg's ex-wife. Rob Conover, a longtime friend of Greg Williams for over 20 years, frequently attended Michelle's hearings. He recalled how she managed to manipulate the police officers into her as an innocent woman. On October 9, 2013, Michelle Williams, aged 45, entered a plea agreement with the county. She pleaded guilty to falsifying evidence and deadly conduct, resulting in an 18-year prison term for a third-degree felony in only a few states. Even though Michelle confessed to cleaning the gun found in Greg's body, doubts about her guilt arose due to the absence of her DNA at the crime scene. "Everything can go different ways. Go big or go home," Michelle stated in court. "With this plea deal, I'm counting on a few years in prison and then I'll be out on parole." However, in February 2014, Michelle abruptly changed her testimony and proclaimed her innocence. The judge immediately annulled the plea deal and scheduled a trial date. The initial hearings began for Michelle, who was labeled Black Widow by the media. She was accused of intentionally committing a crime against her husband in 2011 to claim insurance compensation. Prosecutors characterized the crime as a calculated scheme aimed at profiting from Greg's life insurance. They argued before the jury that Mrs. Williams had drugged her husband and subsequently shot him in the head to collect on his life insurance policy. The motive was money and greed, said Assistant District Attorney Jack Strickland during court proceedings. Michelle's attorney issued a statement on her behalf. Kenneth Wincorn highlighted the challenges posed by the lack of evidence in this case. He pointed out that the prosecution tried to establish premeditation without considering that multiple house searches yielded no suspect DNA. Police had found cleaning supplies at Michelle's home. However, it was entirely plausible that her fingerprints were there since she lived there and cleaned regularly. On April 21st, the jury was unable to hear the complete and decide on an appropriate punishment. Family friends noted that the couple often quarreled. Based on messages found on social media and various messengers, frequent arguments between them primarily revolved around financial issues. During the trial, the prosecutor stated that in the hours before the incident, Greg Williams had a dispute with his wife over finances and even slapped her for spending funds meant for a house down payment. On the other hand, Michelle Williams's defense argued that Greg took his own life because she needed him alive, not dead. Defense attorney Clay Graham pointed out that Greg suffered from depression and used sedatives and steroids. On the day of the tragedy, he was allegedly experiencing severe depression due to losing his grandmother and best friend to suicide. The defense claimed that when Michelle discovered her husband's gunshot wound, she panicked and tried to hide evidence. Her primary concern was to shield their 4-year-old daughter from trauma by concealing the truth. Throughout the court appearances, Michelle Williams consistently attended in varying outfits, complete with makeup and manicures. At one hearing, dressed in a white blouse and black vest, she maintained a largely composed demeanor but did tear up during presentations of images of Greg Williams's body. Michelle Williams' adult son, Andrew O'Brien, testified that his mother asked him to assist in framing Greg's ex-wife, Katie, suggesting she killed Greg over a custody disagreement concerning their daughter, Taylor. This plan faltered early on, since there had never been any disputes regarding their daughter's custody, a fact difficult to refute. 26-year-old Andrew expressed his shock at this request and thought his mother might be experiencing a mental breakdown. Michelle encountered her sons at the trial when they provided testimony against her. The jury ultimately found Michelle guilty of falsifying the evidence. She attempted to gain a delay in sentencing by claiming she was pregnant with twins. However, this claim lacked confirmation, and the verdict stood. Michelle's acting skills and charisma failed her in court. Faced with the choice between appearing as a cold-blooded criminal or a distressed wife and mother, Michelle opted for the latter. "He did it," she remarked, hiding her face in her hands. She even commended the detective on cracking the case, saying, "I wouldn't have survived this day without you. You won." Before the police expressed their doubts about Michelle's account, few believed that Greg had committed suicide. He had too many reasons to live and fully understood how profoundly a friend's death could impact others. Katie Williams suspected that Michelle began her affair with Gene Wallace while Greg was still alive, possibly providing a motive for the crime. If Greg discovered she was involved with another man, he would have left her, denying her financial benefits, Katie stated. Greg was tolerant but had no patience for infidelity. "She devastated numerous lives beyond comprehension," Brandon commented. "She is an expert in manipulation. If more of us had been heard in court, things might have turned out differently." Michelle received a 60-year prison sentence and must serve at least 30 years before being eligible for parole. She is currently incarcerated at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. As a criminal convicted of fraud and other premeditated crimes, Michelle Williams remains behind bars without showing any remorse or accepting full responsibility for her actions to date. The case of a young British woman, Claire Bernal, made headlines across Europe in 2005 and became a precedent for the adoption of a number of laws and amendments aimed at protecting women who have been persecuted. Unfortunately, the gravity of her situation was not immediately appreciated, and her numerous appeals to the police had little effect. Moreover, the key witnesses to the nightmare were not even questioned, and the stalker himself denied his guilt and was released, which was a fatal mistake. In this story, no one was ever punished, because the man obsessed with the woman, having killed the object of his lust, decided to go after her, putting a bullet in his head. The saddest thing is that this tragedy could have been avoided because Claire had been asking for help from the valiant officers of the law for months. She herself made attempts to escape from the pursuer, changing phone numbers and place of residence, but he every time found her, and the nightmare continued until the tragic denouement of September 13, 2005. Who was Clara Burnell? Clara Burnell was born in 1983, August 18th, in a small village called Groombridge, on the border between Kent and East Sussex in England, where almost all of her childhood and adolescence. Very little is known about the woman's parents. She was raised by her mother, Tricia Burnell, but the birth father of the only daughter with whom the woman was divorced did not take any part in the life and education of his own child, and was never interested in her faith. From childhood, Claire was a sociable, smiling, and open-minded girl. She studied at St. Gregory's Catholic School, where she was among the best students, danced, and was fond of fine arts. She then attended private Kent College, where she earned a bachelor's degree in science. Communicative and friendly woman, easily became the soul of any company. She always had a lot of friends, and others spoke of her only positively. At the same time, she was always cautious, prudent enough, had no bad habits, chose her surroundings carefully, and did not befriend dubious personalities. As a teenager, Claire had a good understanding of cosmetics. During her student years, she worked part-time as a makeup artist, creating bright and beautiful images, and later decided to connect her life with this very activity. She graduated from specialized courses in cosmetology and the art of makeup, and also learned the basics of working with theatrical makeup. All these skills helped the girl to get her dream job. She was hired as a beauty and style consultant in the elite store Knightsbridge, recently opened in the luxury department store Harvey Nichols. For the job, Bernal moved to live in London. There, she rented an apartment with 2 friends, because rent in the capital is not a cheap pleasure, even despite the quite decent salary she received in the store. The girl quickly won the respect of colleagues and even engaged in teaching newcomers, because she knew best of all in decorative cosmetics and skincare issues. Clara was characterized as a professional, attentive to details, patient and pleasant woman with a good heart. She loved life in the capital, saw plenty of opportunities to realize her talents, gain new skills and experience, tried not to miss anything, and live life to the fullest. 3 fateful dates. During her first few months at Harvey Nichols, Claire met a man named Michael Peck. He worked there in security and was a senior security guard. He immediately liked Claire. Michael began to give her all sorts of signs of attention. He was also good-looking, seemed to be a serious man, and at first tried to behave unobtrusively. However, Peck was not as simple as it might seem at first glance. At that time, he was already 30 years old, and his past had many dark spots. The man was a citizen of 2 countries, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. He was once a soldier. He deserted, and then hurriedly moved to the UK to avoid responsibility. In his home country, he was left with a wife, from whom he was in the process of divorce, and a young child, in whom he had no interest at all. Michael spoke with a strong accent, but it even gave him a certain charm. He was tall, sturdy, smiling, joking a lot, and able to impress women. The guard started courting Claire, and the girl was flattered by his attention. About a month they just sweet-talked and saw only at work in the department store. However, when Michael invited Claire on a date, she willingly agreed, which actually signed her death warrant. Their first meeting took place in a cozy London coffee shop, where they sat until late in the evening, chatting about life and tell each other about themselves. Even then, Petch admitted to his companion that he is married, but noted that he would try to divorce his wife as soon as possible because he wants to be only with Claire for the rest of his life. His sudden confession, he somewhat embarrassed the girl, but at that point she decided that he must be joking. When Bernal told her mother all about it, the woman also thought it strange. She didn't like the fact that her daughter's suitor was a foreigner, 8 years older and married. Tricia told her daughter that it was better not to meet with this man, but she did not feel threatened and assured her parent that everything was fine. On the second date, the man called Claire to an amusement park, gave her a gorgeous bouquet of flowers, constantly showered her with compliments, and in parting kissed her and confessed his love. Claire was confused. She again could not understand whether Petch was joking. In the evening, she called her mother and shared her worries, to which she again advised her daughter to stop communicating with this guy. Claire agreed with her parent that this behavior is a bit strange, but noted that she likes Michael, and perhaps she needs to get to know him better. Therefore, when a week later the guard again invited the woman on a date, she again agreed. True, this time he was too persistent, confessed his love, and told his companion that he would never let her go again. Now Bernal was not only confused and discouraged, but somewhat frightened. She had decided that this was their last date with Michael, and she would not continue her relationship with him any longer. Their affair, if you can call it that, lasted less than 1 month, and in all that time the couple only had 3 dates, but even that was enough for Petch to decide that Claire belonged to him from now on. From that moment on, Claire's life became a nightmare. In love or obsessed? Soon Michael took a vacation and went to the Czech Republic for a couple of weeks to meet there with his wife and solve the issue of divorce, which, by the way, he did not manage to do. Bernal, during this time, almost stopped thinking about him, lived her old life, and believed that Petch remained in the past until one evening he did not call her. The man asked the girl to meet him at the airport, and when she refused, he pressed on pity, saying that he needed help. Claire went to meet him, and even agreed to accommodate him for a day, as he, according to him, moved out of the rented apartment, and in a new one could move in only the next day. Nevertheless, having crossed the threshold of the woman's dwelling, Michael said that he planned to stay with her and wanted them to live together from now on. Claire, his words, not on a joke, frightened, and she asked him to immediately leave the apartment, but the man refused to do so. Then the girl and her neighbors threatened to call the police if Petch did not leave immediately. He left, but remained sitting on the doorstep, where he stayed until the morning. The next day at work, Bernal tried to talk to her boyfriend and explained to him that between them all over and those 3 dates did not mean much. But Michael did not even want to listen to her and just asked to give him another chance to fix everything and prove the sincerity of his feelings. He brought a huge bouquet of scarlet roses and walked Claire home with them, despite the fact that she refused to accept the flowers. The guard again sat on the doorstep of her apartment all night, and when the neighbor tried to drive him away, he threatened that it would be easier for him to kill Claire than to let her go. It was clear from his crazed look that he wasn't lying, and he was dead serious. Despite the fact that Michael spoke of his love, he looked and acted as if he were obsessed with one single obsession, to possess the object of his lust. Bernal tried to behave calmly, and a couple of times tried to talk to the ex-boyfriend to explain to him that she had no feelings for him, and regretted that she even agreed to go with him on those 3 dates. But Michael, hearing this, hugged her tightly to him and whispered in her ear that she loved him, but she just didn't realize it yet. Then he tried to kiss Claire, but she managed to break free of his embrace. 6 months of nightmare and police inaction. The following months were, without exaggeration, the worst of Claire's life. She admitted to her mother that she no longer feels safe, lives in constant tension, does not know what to expect, and literally balances on the verge of a nervous breakdown. At work, Michael walked by her store all day long and kept looking at Claire. He called her dozens of times a day and sent her up to 50 messages, in which then confessed his love, asked for forgiveness, and begged to return to him, then went to explicit threats and promises that they will still be together. Claire had changed her phone number several times, but it usually took Posh no more than a couple of days to find out her new number. The worst part was that he knew where she lived and was constantly on duty at her house. At one point, the desperate woman attempted to change her residence, but the guards secretly followed her after work and found out her new address, so the harassment continued. Michael was obviously convinced that he and Claire were still in a relationship. He counted how many months had passed since their first meeting, first date, first kiss, and suggested that they celebrate these small dates. In his messages, the man repeatedly wrote that if Claire didn't belong to him, no one would have her at all, and he would take care of it. Claire cried every day. She could no longer concentrate on her work. She was afraid to go out. She flinched at every phone call, and at night, she began to have nightmares. She lost a lot of weight, looked confused, and became a shadow of her old self. Claire's mother, friends, and colleagues all told her to go to the police, and she finally agreed. To begin with, she approached the head of security at the mall where she worked. He had once been a police officer, so he took the employee's complaint seriously. The man talked to other employees and watched a lot of surveillance videos and was convinced that Pesh was really stalking Bernal. The head of security then ordered the problematic security guard to be moved to another floor and to the far wing, but that didn't stop him and had little effect on the situation. Michael spent almost all of his time outside the Knightsbridge store watching Claire. Then the management of the department store found no other way but to dismiss the employee who does not fulfill his direct duties. This did not stop the harassment, and Claire, despite the threats of Pesh, still decided to go to the police. However, when questioned, the man categorically denied the fact of harassment, claiming that he did not want anything bad, but only tried to make amends to Claire so that they were together again. According to him, he did not threaten her at all, but because of his accent, she could have misunderstood and misinterpreted his words. The police also listened to Bernal's version of events, but did not communicate with her colleagues and roommates, who were direct witnesses to all the events, and could confirm that Michael had been stalking her for months and repeatedly threatened to kill her. The law enforcement officers considered the situation to be non-serious and not posing any threat to the woman's life or health. They did not make an official risk assessment, and the stalker got off with a small fine and a warning. He was also banned from the shopping center where Claire worked and from approaching her. However, just a day after Pesh was questioned and notified of the ban on approaching Claire, he was back at her house, peering intently through the windows. Bernal called the police when she saw him, but by the time the police arrived, the man had already left, and the officers of the law only gave him the benefit of the doubt and took no action. The calm before the tragedy. On June 10, 2005, the girl again went to the police because of Michael's harassment and violation of the prohibition on approaching. But he again disappeared before the law enforcers arrived, and they again were unwilling to do anything, showing criminal negligence. On the third time, the man was still arrested, but he offered no resistance, behaved calmly, and silently held out his hands, allowing himself to be handcuffed. He was charged with stalking and harassment and sent to jail, where he spent a week before being released on bail. The trial in the case was scheduled for August 31st, 2005, but before that, Claire decided to take a vacation to get some rest and distraction. She went with her mother and a friend to one of the popular Italian resorts, where they had a great time enjoying the warm sea and gentle sun. At one point, it even seemed to the woman that the whole nightmare was over. When Claire returned to London, she was amazed to find that Michael was no longer following her. He was nowhere to be found. At that moment, she was greatly relieved and simply lost her guard. However, Bernal had no idea what her tormentor was doing and what he was preparing for her. In the meantime, Pesh had gone to his native land, where he visited shooting ranges every day, honing his skill with weapons. He underwent special training and received a permit to buy a pistol. The man smuggled the firearms into the UK, and after arriving, he never attempted to meet Claire before the scheduled court hearing. In the courtroom, he behaved calmly, pleaded guilty, apologized, and assured that he meant no harm. Pesh was again released and actually received no punishment. The next 2 weeks passed quietly, and Claire finally convinced herself that it was over and Michael would not bother her again. Crime in a high-end department store. September 13, 2005, was an ordinary Tuesday. The day was drawing to a close, and Claire kept glancing at her watch. She was going on a date with her new boyfriend in the evening. She was in a good mood, and there was no sign of trouble. She was having a nice conversation with a colleague, telling her about her plans, when a strange sound was heard in the store from the side of the service entrance. As Pesh had worked as a senior security guard for a long time, he was well aware of all the emergency entrances and exits as well as the service areas and entered the building undetected. He appeared suddenly, as if he had grown behind Claire's back. When her partner saw the man, she didn't even have time to say anything. Bernal obviously realized from her friend's face that something was wrong, but at that moment a shot rang out. Michael drew his gun and fired the first shot into the back of Claire's head, almost point blank, and when she fell to the floor, he fired 3 more bullets into her face. The sound of the gunshots caused panic in the store. People started screaming, running, and hiding. Everyone expected the gunman to come out into the lobby and start firing indiscriminately at customers. But instead, the man fired 1 more shot into the ceiling, then put the muzzle to his temple and pulled the trigger, ending his own life. Pesh had fulfilled his gruesome promise. The girl he'd been stalking for almost a year and whose life he'd literally poisoned was gone, but he was determined not to live without her. When medics and law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, there was no one left to save or arrest. Consequences. On that fateful evening, Tricia Bernal was at her sister's birthday party and returned home late. As she drove up, she saw the police at the front door and immediately realized that something terrible had happened. When she was told that Claire had been taken from her life, she asked, "It was Pesh, wasn't it?" and then covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. Later, the woman recalled that she did not have a bad feeling that night. She did not feel anxious and could not even imagine that right now, her only child was being taken away from her. Although earlier, she had always thought that she would feel if Claire was in danger and would be able to protect her daughter. Tricia also added that her heiress saw only good in people because she herself carried only light and goodness to those around her. The examination showed that Michael was under the influence of illegal substances at the time of the crime. Moreover, a few months before the tragedy, he consulted with one of the employees of the department store, who studied at the law faculty of one of the prestigious London universities, about what punishment is provided by law for the crime and what circumstances can be considered mitigating. This became known to other colleagues, including Claire herself. The woman was frightened by what was happening and reported to the police that the ex-boyfriend may be planning to take her life. But no action the officers of the law did not want to take. In general, the crime itself and all the events that preceded it were the result of negligence of law enforcement officers, who for almost a year could not assess the seriousness of the situation. Despite Claire's regular appeals for help and in search of protection, Pesh was arrested twice but released each time on symbolic bail, violated a prescribed prohibition against approaching the woman, openly threatened her with physical violence, and even consulted a lawyer about punishment. However, all of this, according to the police, was not enough to send the man to jail. Moreover, he was able to leave the country without hindrance, purchase weapons, and return with them to carry out his murderous plan. At the same time, even key witnesses, colleagues and roommates, who personally heard the guard threatening Claire, were not questioned during the whole time. It was only when Michael took the life of his victim and took his own life along with her that law enforcement realized how serious the situation was and how many mistakes they had made. Tricia decided not to let it go and to get justice. She joined forces with other grieving families who had lost loved ones in similar circumstances. Together, they launched a national program to help victims of stalking. Also, thanks to their efforts, the law was amended, and stalking was reclassified as a criminal offense. And in 2012, a new law was passed that completely banned stalking. A helpline was also set up for victims who did not receive proper support and protection from the police. With the help of Tricia Bernau, several documentaries were made about the last months of her daughter's life and about that brutal crime right in the workplace. The woman has also made numerous appearances on popular television programs, urging victims of harassment not to remain silent about their plight and not to take it lightly. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Aya Hacham. Aya Hacham, 19, faced a devastating challenge that ultimately befell her family. She had left her house to buy groceries at the nearby store, but she never came back. Aya's family had immigrated to the UK from Lebanon in November 2011, seeking a better life. Her father, Ismail, wanted his children to grow up safely, receive a good education, and become valuable members of society, which is why he had applied for asylum for himself and his family. After receiving their residence permit, the Hashim family settled in Blackburn. Aya was an ambitious and driven student, pursuing a degree in law at Salford University. Tragically, her life was cut short in a senseless act on May 17, 2020, at around 3 p.m., a brutal irony for her parents, who had left Lebanon seeking a safer future, only to lose their daughter in broad daylight. On that fateful day, Aya had gone to the supermarket near her family's house, but failed to return. About an hour later, a police helicopter appeared above the area. When Aya didn't answer her phone, her father set out to look for her, only to find the police had blocked off the street where she was last seen walking. Meanwhile, Aya's mother searched online and stumbled upon news of a woman being shot in their neighborhood. Soon after, Aya's parents received the devastating news that their daughter had been killed in the shooting. Aya was walking to the supermarket on King Street when a car, a Toyota Avensis, drove by with multiple occupants. One of the passengers fired 2 shots from the vehicle, and tragically, one of the bullets hit Aya. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but despite the doctor's best efforts, she sadly passed away later that day. The authorities have stated that they do not believe the incident was motivated by racial or religious hatred. Deputy Chief Terry Woods has appealed to the public, requesting that anyone with dashcam footage or surveillance recordings that capture the Toyota Avensis or any suspicious activity come forward and share their evidence with the police. Later that day, the police discovered the Toyota Avensis involved in the shooting abandoned near the crime scene. They also obtained CCTV footage of the events surrounding Aya's death. The footage shows Aya walking down King Street at 3:03 p.m. As she approaches a pole, the Toyota Avensis drives by with its rear side window down, and the shooter fires a fatal shot that passes through and hits the pole. Out of respect, the police did not release footage of Aya falling to the ground. The recording suggests that there were at least 2 individuals in the car, the driver and the shooter. The perpetrators quickly fled the scene and abandoned the vehicle on a nearby street. Less than 2 hours later, the police located the car and began searching for its owner, while a forensic team examined the vehicle for potential evidence. Pharaoh Sulan, a 40-year-old man, was a successful businessman with a thriving tire shop and a loving family living a prosperous life. He often posted pictures on social media, flaunting his new, expensive cars. However, his problems didn't stem from anyone's envy, but rather from a new car wash that opened in the neighborhood, owned by Papat Khan. The car wash started selling car tires, sparking a conflict between Khan and Sulan, which affected Sulan's business, making it less profitable. This led to a public feud between the neighbors, with frequent police intervention to break up fights between employees of the two organizations. Following Aya's tragic death, the police launched a massive operation, arresting several individuals suspected of being involved in her murder. As some of the suspects had fled the UK, the police collaborated with law enforcement officers from other countries to bring them to justice. In the aftermath of Aya Hachem's death, the police initially charged 8 people: Abu Bakr Essa, 32, Anthony Anis, 31, Az Hussein, 35, Kashif Manzoor, 26, Uthman Satya, 29, Zamir Raja, 33, Judy Chapman, 28, and Pharaoh Sulan, 40. It's clear that her death was an accident. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Pharaoh Sulan had hired a hitman to take out his competitor, KH, who owned a tire shop with a car wash. The bullet that hit Aya was actually meant for KH. The crucial mistake happened when the shooter misidentified his target. He wasn't aiming at a business owner. During the second shot, Aya was inadvertently standing between the shooter and the employee, who was mistakenly thought to be KH. The bullet struck her on the left side of her chest, passed through her body, and hit the pole. The car sped away immediately. Khan, the car wash owner, rushed to help Aya after witnessing her fall to the ground and called emergency services during the ordeal. First, there's the client, Pharaoh Sulan. When his business began to lose profits, he decided to eliminate his competitor, KH. Despite knowing he would be a prime suspect due to his obvious motive, Sulan went ahead with the plan. The investigators, led by Az Hussein, discovered the perpetrators: Zamir Raja, the shooter, and Anthony Ennis, the driver of the Toyota. Interestingly, the criminals scouted the car wash area the day before the incident. Abu Bakr SAA purchased the Toyota using funds provided by Sulan shortly before the incident. Kashif Manzoor ensured the car was in working order by performing technical checks and fixing any issues. Meanwhile, Uthman Satya and his girlfriend Judy Chapman drove the shooter and driver to the Toyota in their Ford Fiesta and then took them away after the crime, abandoning the car on a nearby street. On that day, at 1:14 p.m., Judy Chapman and her boyfriend Uthman Satya drove to Bolton to pick up Raja and Enos. From there, the four of them drove to Blackburn, where the Toyota was parked. While they were en route, Kashif Manzoor made sure the Toyota was ready to go. The car was only a couple of miles away from the car wash. Sulan, meanwhile, took up a strategic position, walking out to the front of his service station so he could see everything that was about to happen. However, when they got to the Toyota, they discovered it wouldn't start due to a dead battery. To fix the problem, Manzoor had to jump-start the car by connecting its battery to another car's battery using wires. Once the Toyota was running, Manzoor handed the keys over to Raja and Ennis and headed back to the service station. As they drove away, the Toyota could be seen approaching the car wash with its window down. Raja and Ennis circled the block several times, waiting for the perfect moment to position themselves on the same side of the street as Khan's car wash. During the fourth drive-by shooting, the Toyota slowed down, and KH, the intended target, happened to be on the street at that exact moment. He witnessed the shooter, Zamir Raja, making a mistake and firing the first shot at another employee, which fortunately missed its mark. The second bullet struck KH. After the shooting, Raja and Ennis fled the scene, abandoning their car and getting into another car driven by Judy Chapman and Uthman Satya. They were driven away from Blackburn by 5 p.m. The police discovered the abandoned car belonging to the criminals even before they found the Toyota. Unaware of who was behind the shooting, the police went to Sulan's tire shop to review the surveillance footage. As the officer was analyzing the video, Oz Hussein, who had discovered the perpetrators, entered the shop. Sulan gestured towards the door, and everyone aware of the incident left the room, proceeding to the second floor to discuss the matter in private. The police are reviewing footage from a surveillance camera with Abu Bakr Satya, the buyer of the Toyota, sitting behind them. When they hear a transmission on the police radio announcing the discovery of the getaway car, Satya quickly gets up and discusses something with Sulan. 9 days after KH's murder, Zamir Raja, the shooter, flew to Lisbon Airport in Portugal where he met Anthony Innes, the Toyota's driver. Both men fled the country. Feroz Sulan, the client, was arrested the day after KH's murder on May 18th. Abu Bakr Satya was arrested the following day, on May 19th. Judy Chapman and Uthman Satya were arrested on May 20th, and Az Hussein and Kashif Manzoor on May 21st. Zamir Raja, hoping to return to England undetected, was caught at a London train station on June 6th. Anthony Ennis was arrested in Spain on July 4th and extradited to the UK. All suspects were charged with KH Hashem's murder and conspiracy to murder Khan, the car wash owner. Initially, all of them denied their involvement, but their silence was short-lived. As they attempted to downplay their roles in the crime, the suspects began testifying against each other, hoping to avoid life imprisonment. As a result, the police uncovered even the smallest details. On August 5, 2021, the verdicts were announced. Feroz Sulan was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years, making him eligible for parole in 34 years. This is not Sulan's first prison sentence, however. In 2001, he was involved in a hit-and-run that killed a 67-year-old man. Sulan fled the scene, leaving his car behind, and later claimed it had been stolen, but this didn't help his case. He served 3.5 years in prison. Raja, the shooter, received the same sentence as Sulan, life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years. He had agreed to participate in the crime for £500. The driver, Anthony Innes, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years. Azid Hussein, who helped find the perpetrators, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years. Abu Bakr Satya, who purchased the Toyota Avensis, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 28 years. Uthman Satya, who organized the transportation of the shooter and driver, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 28 years. Kashif Manzoor, responsible for keeping the car in working order on the day of the crime, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years. The judge announced the verdict, stating that none of the 7 defendants showed any remorse after the shooting. Instead, they collectively attempted to deceive, manipulate, and conspire their way out of trouble, eventually turning against each other in an effort to protect themselves. In October 2021, Judy Chapman, the driver of the Ford Fiesta, was convicted of involuntary deprivation of life for the death of KH Hachem. She received a 15-year prison sentence. However, further investigation revealed that additional individuals were involved in the crime, as discovered through analysis of correspondence among the convicted parties. On May 5, 2023, 42-year-old Louis Otway from Manchester was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 32 years. During the trial, it was proven that Otway played a key role in connecting Azid Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis, facilitating Hussein's connection with the perpetrators of the crime. In this case, another woman played a key role. C. Bambridge was the 10th and final convict. According to prosecutors, on the day of the crime, Bambridge traveled to Bolton to meet Zamir Raja and Anthony Innes, where she took their mobile phones and turned them off. She then drove back to Trafford, turned the phones back on, and Innes's phone began working again in Partington, where he lived. Bambridge then went to Sale, where she turned Raja's phone on. Lancashire police claimed that Bambridge did this to create the false impression that Raja and Innes were in Greater Manchester, rather than in Blackburn, at the time of the shooting, providing them with a false alibi. Bambridge, 32, admitted to conspiring to pervert the course of justice on August 11, 2023. She was sentenced to 23 months in prison, becoming the last person sentenced in the Aya Hacham case. Salford University, where Aya was a student, decided to award her diploma to her parents in a ceremony held in November 2021. Aya's family said she had always dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rod Kovlin. One summer day in 2014, the New York Police Department received an unexpected call from a woman requesting to speak with the detective handling the Shella Kovlin case. The caller was Deborah Holmes, and she urgently requested a meeting with the investigators. Receiving such surprising news, they hoped this unexpected call might help thaw the long stagnant investigation into a tragic loss that had been at a standstill for 5 years. Shelley Kovlin's tragic demise had caused a stir in Manhattan on the eve of New Year's 2010. Shelley had grown up on the West Side, immersed in an Orthodox Jewish community. Her family's deep-rooted presence in this tight-knit neighborhood shaped her upbringing. Shelley's journey from a blissful childhood to an accomplished adulthood was marked by her love for learning and academic excellence. This passion for knowledge eventually led her to a prestigious degree in asset management, opening doors to a thriving career in the Swiss banking sector. Her rapid rise in the financial world saw her skillfully managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for her clients. In 1998, despite a successful career in one of the world's wealthiest cities, Shelley felt a void in her life. She had financial security and a loving family, yet her dream of having her own family and becoming a mother remained unfulfilled. In February 1998, determined to change her destiny, Shelley attended a Jewish singles event aimed at helping those seeking their significant other. There, she met 26-year-old Rod Kovlin, a fellow professional in the banking sector. The young couple shared many common interests, both driven by ambitions for success and stability in life. Their connection was instant and profound. The relationship blossomed rapidly as they complemented each other perfectly, disregarding the notable age difference. Shelley and Rod were inseparable, spending every moment together. Their love was so intense that shortly after meeting, they decided to get married, despite some acquaintances considering it a hasty decision. For Rod and Shella, everything felt just right. The happy couple soon welcomed 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, completing their family. Shella Kovlin's death on New Year's Eve 2009 shattered her family's idyllic life. Initially, police deemed it an accident, but Rod Kovlin's frantic call about finding his ex-wife lifeless in the bathtub prompted emergency efforts to save her. Tragically, it was too late, and Shella's body was cold and motionless. The police swiftly responded to the incident. Upon arrival, they assessed the situation and cordoned off a street in Manhattan. They found a lavish residence near the city park. The Upper West Side was known for safety, and the officers initially suspected Shella's death was a tragic case of self-harm. Inside the apartment, they discovered children's toys scattered around. Proceeding to the bathroom, they found the woman's body wrapped in a blanket by her husband. The bloody water and wet floor indicated Rod had recently pulled the body from the water. A wound on Shelley's head, still bleeding, was noticeable. The officers noted an open cabinet door with a torn hinge, suggesting the woman might have slipped and torn it off while trying to hold on. After a careful inspection, they determined there was no break-in and no signs of a struggle were found. Investigators increasingly leaned towards the belief that Shell's death was an accident. The detective handling the case decided to speak with family members during their questioning. It was revealed that Shelley and Rod's 9-year-old daughter was the first to discover her mother's body, traumatized and shocked by what she had seen. The girl managed to tell the police officer how everything happened. It turned out that the previous night, she and her younger brother had been sleeping in their mother's bed, a fairly common occurrence. Waking up in the middle of the night and noticing her mother's absence, she went to look for her and stumbled upon the horrifying scene in the bathroom. The frightened child hurriedly contacted her father for help. Rod and Shelley had just separated, and he had moved into a new apartment in the same building, on the same floor. Crossing the corridor was all it took to reach his apartment. The girl called her father, who was nearby, and arrived immediately. Entering the bathroom, he pulled Shell's body from the water and called for emergency services. The girl's account matched exactly what Rod had described, confirming the theory of an accidental death. The police informed Shell's relatives about the tragedy, which deeply shocked everyone. The autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the day after the body was found. However, surprisingly, it never took place. When the medical examiner called the investigators to start the examination, he unexpectedly learned that, despite its necessity, the procedure would not be conducted. This baffled the examiner, wondering how this could happen. It turned out that a rabbi from the synagogue Shell frequented had intervened. He contacted an organization responsible for the burial of Orthodox Jews, which then requested the police for permission to access the tragedy site for religious rites required by the victim's family's faith. Permission was granted, and a team accompanied by the rabbi arrived at the scene. They cleaned the bathtub of blood traces and prepared Shell's body before the burial. All collected evidence and clues were destroyed before reaching the police's forensic department. The organization acted swiftly because autopsies are considered taboo in Orthodox Jewish tradition, seen as desecrating the deceased's body. In this case, the synagogue's rabbi exerted pressure on Shell's family. Grieving relatives and the husband, appreciative of the rabbi's assistance and with no doubts about the accidental nature of the incident, didn't object to his help. The family also agreed to forgo the autopsy, leaving the funeral arrangements to the burial preparation organization. Thus, within 24 hours, Shell was buried, and hundreds of people attended to pay their last respects and offer condolences to the family. Later, upon learning from the police that potential clues were destroyed during the cleaning of the bathroom, doubts about the official version of Shell's death began to haunt her parents. A fall in the bathtub certainly posed a risk, but the likelihood of death from such an accident seemed increasingly improbable to them. Although nothing substantiated their doubts, the thought that their daughter's demise was not accidental troubled them deeply. Since the evidence was destroyed, the New York Police Department lost the opportunity for further investigation, prompting the family to hire a private detective to clarify the circumstances and verify if Shell's death was indeed due to a tragic fall. The private investigator hired by the woman's relatives began unraveling this peculiar case, first visiting the deceased's family home to speak with the relatives. From their statements, he learned that Rod and Shell's relationship was far from perfect, and their marriage had been facing serious challenges. The couple had celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in 2008, but soon after, their marital bliss began to crumble. Rod faced difficulties in his career, frequently changing jobs, and it was revealed that he had developed a gambling addiction, investing huge sums in it. These behavioral changes worried Shelley, and she was dissatisfied with her husband, neglecting the family and spending extensive time on computer games. Rod was using their savings for backgammon tournaments, which Shelley had complained about to her close ones, frustrated by the amount of family money he spent on his numerous travels. Additionally, she discovered that he had been unfaithful during his many trips. Shelley was neither passive nor naive regarding her husband's behavior. Upon discovering his infidelities through his emails, she decided to end their marital relationship and obtained permission for a religious divorce. Externally, the couple still appeared as spouses, but Rod had moved into another apartment in the same building. An official divorce required some time to process. Despite their separation and strained relations, Shell and Rod tried to maintain a friendly facade, especially for their children. However, conflicts and disagreements often arose due to Rod's behavior. Shella had recently expressed to her close ones her grievances about her husband, describing him as aggressive and hot-tempered. She felt he was monitoring her, entering her apartment when she wasn't home and checking her emails. She also suspected that Rod had installed a camera in the building's corridor to see when she came home. These complexities in their marital life could have been grounds for further investigation into Shelley's death. Gathering all these details, the private detective proposed the theory that Rod might have been involved in his wife's demise. He needed to conduct further investigations to uncover the whole truth. The detective's first goal was to determine if a crime had indeed taken place at the scene where the body was found. He planned to inspect Shella's apartment, but encountered a problem. The door was sealed. Without hesitation, he obtained a court order to access the site, and with it, accompanied by New York police officers, he arrived at the scene. He attempted to unlock the door with a key provided in advance, but the stubborn lock resisted for some time. After a few moments, Rod Coughlin emerged from his apartment at the end of the corridor, claiming to have heard noise and come to check what was happening. Upon questioning by the police and the detective, Rod took the key and effortlessly opened the door, raising some questions for the detective. Did Rod really just happen to hear sounds in the corridor, or was he intentionally monitoring the situation? Once inside the apartment, the detective focused intently on finding evidence to support his theory of murder. According to Shelley's relatives, she was home on December 31st, but her phone was missing. The detective thoroughly searched all rooms, only finding the woman's phone charger, while the phone itself was not located. The detective also faced the task of examining the bathroom, the site of Shelley's demise. He paid special attention to the hinge that investigators believed she had torn off during a fall. The more he examined this item, the more he doubted that Shelley could have torn off the metal detail, which was securely attached to the cabinet. It would have required immense strength, and even considering the woman's weight, there were significant doubts about such a possibility. After a long discussion with law enforcement, the detective tried to convince them that this was not an accident, but a homicide. The investigators were not persuaded, citing a lack of evidence. As a result, a decision was made to perform an autopsy to conclusively determine the cause of death. The impending exhumation of Shelley's body sparked serious contemplation and debate within her family. More than 2 weeks had passed since her burial, and it was a difficult decision for her loved ones to make. In the Jewish religion, such interventions are viewed very negatively, and religious leaders often oppose this practice. The family needed time to decide, but despite the prohibitions, they deemed it crucial to uncover the truth about their daughter's death and agreed to the exhumation. However, this step was complicated not only by moral considerations, but also because to carry out the exhumation, a special order from the prosecutor's office was required, which was not easy to obtain despite the family's consent. It took almost 3 months after securing the necessary documents for the exhumation and autopsy to be conducted. The results were startling. The examination revealed that Shelley did not die from a fall, but from asphyxiation due to violent strangulation, which had broken her neck bones. Consequently, the official version of her death changed. No longer could her passing be considered an accident, and it was officially recognized that the young woman had been murdered. The detectives' inquiries and doubts were justified. Shelley's autopsy was key, spurring the MIPD to resume the probe. Detectives closely checked phone logs and finances, vital clues. Relatives and all who knew the couple were interviewed, the nanny, maid, and divorce lawyer. The lawyer informed the police about strange behavior of the couple during the divorce hearing. Rod claimed inability to pay alimony due to joblessness, but the judge's joke about giving up his games angered him, exposing his true nature. Rod then sought revenge, accusing Shell of misconduct, which caused her trouble, but investigation found no evidence to support his claims. But the most horrible aspect of this story was when Rod and Shell's son revealed how his father had trained him to say phrases intended to discredit his mother. Rod paid a high price for his villainous acts. In a new divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, he was prohibited from being alone with his children, a measure that remained in effect even after Shelley's death. Rod did not get custody of his children, and a social worker delivered them to their parents, provoking his anger. He probably believed he would finally assume responsibility for his children. The police also interviewed a woman who used to care for Rod's children before being fired by him. She provided the detectives with helpful information. It turned out that on December 30th, Shelley had received an expensive keratin treatment costing several $100s. The post-treatment recommendations included avoiding moisture and heat for several days, prohibiting baths or showers. This raised a question: why would Shelley risk damaging her hair by disobeying these recommendations? The investigators speculated that Shelley did not bathe the day of her death, but their conclusions were not direct evidence and were insufficient to accuse anyone of murder based on this. Detectives checked the building's surveillance footage on the day of the murder. They noticed Rod's strange actions at 4 a.m. He left dressed to go out and came back later. The night guard found Rod's early morning trip unusual, as he had never left so early before. Rod came back with chocolate bars, offering them to the guard, which the investigators believed was deliberate to make an alibi for himself. Rod became the prime suspect. Investigators had to prove his guilt by any means. Their main question was what drove Rod to kill his wife. Despite divorce hearings, Shelley and Rod were still married. Without a will or divorce, the $5 million property would go to Rod. Shelley had made an appointment to change her will to exclude her husband, which was a blow to Rod and provided a motive. Since he was a suspect, Shelley's assets were secured pending further evidence. Investigators suspected Rod had installed spyware to monitor his wife. Surveillance footage also showed Shelley returning home at 8 p.m. the night before, talking on the phone, which was never found after the crime. Now they knew for sure the phone was in the apartment, and they decided to conduct another search of the crime scene. The investigators didn't have to search far to find Shelley's mobile phone, which was lying on her bedside table, connected to the charger. Despite previous searches by the police and a private detective, the phone had gone unnoticed. This suggested that Rod had returned the phone to the sealed apartment. Rod was called to testify, but he had already hired a lawyer who advised him to remain silent. The investigators had to continue searching for new evidence of his involvement. After examining Rod's phone records, the police found frequent calls to a number registered in Jacksonville, North Carolina. The number belonged to Deborah Holmes, a married woman with 3 children. She was 14 years older than Rod, and they had met at a competition 5 months before Shelley's murder and had a passionate affair. The lovers would meet during the tournaments or play together online. Investigators called the woman to question her, but she refused, citing her lawyer's advice. This lawyer also represented Rod Kovlin, complicating the case. Despite efforts, any incriminating messages between Rod and Deborah had been professionally deleted, leaving the authorities stymied. Days turned into months and years, and it became apparent that Rod Kovlin was evading justice. Perhaps the crime he committed was perfect, but the rabbi's cleanup of the bathroom, erasing all traces of blood and other evidence, played a crucial role. This action destroyed all potential initial DNA, fingerprints, or fibers, complicating the investigation, which increasingly dragged on. Rod never admitted to his crime, and the lack of evidence prevented the case from going to trial. 5 years had passed since the investigation into Shelley's demise began, yet no arrests had been made. After years of fruitless searches for clues and evidence of Rodkin's involvement in his wife's demise, the suspect's mistress suddenly came forward. Following her phone call, the police invited her to the station. Deborah Holmes immediately came in. It turned out that she and Rod had broken up a few months earlier, prompting her to contact the police. What she shared with the investigators over the next 3 days shocked them. Deborah had much to reveal. She told them about Rod's plans concerning custody of his children. Since Rod was still a suspect in his wife's demise and had no custody rights over the children, He couldn't access his deceased wife's money. Rod was prepared to do anything to seize millions and had hatched a vile plan. Kovlin planned to convince his 15-year-old daughter to fake an assault, later accusing his father of the crime. This would land the grandfather in jail, losing custody rights over the grandchildren. Rod hoped his daughter would agree to his plan in exchange for money. In the meantime, the criminal regularly withdrew money from the only account he had access to, where Sheely had deposited funds for the education of her children. Rod's parents noticed that he was squandering the savings that should have been for the future of his daughter and son. They were very upset by his lack of interest in the lives of his children, which led to a dispute. Rod was so angry with his parents that he seriously considered ending their lives in 2012. Rod Kovlin confided his plan to Deborah. He intended to have his daughter put rat poison in her grandparents' tea, since the girl was a minor. Rod calculated she would spend much less time in prison than he would. Deborah persuaded her lover to abandon this evil intent. Following this, Rod conceived several other ideas. At one point, he contemplated burning down his parents' house, jamming the doors to trap them inside. He has also considered arranging a sham marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, after which she would have to forfeit part of her inheritance to her father. Deborah was gathering evidence and accumulating data on hard drives, cautiously waiting for Rod to lose interest in her before handing that valuable information over to the investigators. The recordings contained hundreds, perhaps thousands, of Rod's conversations with various people. Deborah's contribution to this complex investigation was significant. As investigators began analyzing the recordings, they discovered something astonishing. In a conversation with an acquaintance, Rod accidentally mentioned having keys to Sheila's apartment and the ability to access it at any time. These hard drives became a valuable resource for the police, as they extracted hundreds of materials related to the case. Investigators found that Rod was plotting against his own daughter, planning to pin the responsibility for the mother's demise on her. In an email address that the father used to forge an email, it was claimed that the daughter admitted to lying and that her mother didn't just fall, according to the fabricated story. They had an argument in the evening, and in anger, she pushed her mother in the bathroom. Thanks to all the information gathered, the police finally had compelling evidence to charge Rod Kovlin with the demise of his wife on November 1, 2015. Rod Kovlin's arrest brought the trial of Sheila's perpetrator, but victory remained uncertain. The circumstantial charges left room for a skilled lawyer to instill doubt. Detectives pursued their investigation, amassing new data and verifying evidence. Unexpectedly, irrefutable proof emerged. In prison, Kovlin confessed his wife's murder to a fellow inmate, even mimicking the strangulation. Surveillance footage corroborated the autopsy, directly implicating Kovlin. The trial lasted 7 long weeks, during which the jury heard all the heinous plans Kovlin intended to execute, including taking his wife's life, targeting his parents, and framing his own children. The jury was appalled by his cold-blooded and deceitful nature. It took them 2 days to reach a final verdict. In March 2019, the court found Rod Kovlin guilty of the demise of Sheila Danishevsky, his wife, and the mother of his children. Despite the lack of direct evidence, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole only after 25 years. Sheila Kovlin was a successful and determined woman who sought simple family happiness. However, a ruthless, greedy monster crossed her path, destroying not only her life, but also those of her children and loved ones. This tragic story found justice thanks to Deborah Holmes's determination. The criminal was punished for his horrific actions, and Deborah's courage likely helped not only in achieving justice, but also in preventing possible future crimes. Rod Kovlin will never again harm his family or the citizens of New York. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in the city of Allamont Springs, Florida. She had an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father worked as a construction worker, often traveling to other states for several days, leaving the kids alone with their mother. Jessica was a cheerful and lovely child. She liked to spend a lot of time outdoors with friends, play with her siblings, and she also had a deep love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That day, her father went to the store to buy some items for the holiday, while her mother stayed in their apartment, packing for the upcoming trip. Jessica returned home from school with other children and asked her mother if she could go to the yard. She wanted to wait for her father, who was expected to return from the store soon. Her mother agreed and told her daughter not to go anywhere else. Their apartment complex was situated away from the main road, surrounded by trees, and the mother felt relatively secure about Jessica's safety. All the neighborhood children, including Jessica, always played there without constant adult supervision, and everything had been fine. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., her father returned home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised, as her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he claimed she wasn't there. The parents went outside and searched the entire yard, but they couldn't find Jessica. Frustrated, they decided to check with neighbors, hoping someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor mentioned seeing Jessica in the yard earlier. She was sitting on a bench and reading a book, but that didn't help the worried parents find her. As darkness fell and their daughter remained missing, they decided to call the police. Officers arrived in a few minutes, initiated a search, and started interviewing neighbors. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find Jessica, so the police expanded the search area to nearby streets. A few hours later, an unexpected call came into the police station. The caller provided sparse details, but the police raced to the pumping station, finding Jessica's body hidden nearby in a trash bag, mere yards from the road, but obscured by the bridge's location. Personal effects by the corpse suggested the tragic circumstances. Meanwhile, the investigators focused on tracing the 911 call. It was evident that the call came from the murderer, and the police hoped it could help identify them. But there was a challenge. The call was made from a public payphone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the officers arrived, the perpetrator had already vanished. Detectives tried to find fingerprints on the phone, but it was a challenge. It was a public payphone, so there might be multiple prints. Moreover, investigators realized that the criminal had likely wiped the phone after the call or used gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica was killed elsewhere, and her body was transported to the water pumping station. Traces on the ground in front of the facility indicated that the killer likely pulled the body from a vehicle in a trash bag and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothing was intact, except for one shoe. Police couldn't find it in the bag or in the surrounding area. The only lead found at the crime scene was the tire track on the ground. Police couldn't be certain it belonged to the killer's vehicle, but they photographed it and made a cast. Medical experts examined the body and determined that the victim died from strangulation based on marks on her face and neck. It seemed the killer had used their bare hands. A partially digested hamburger was found in her stomach, which she had consumed less than an hour before her death. Her mother stated that she had not provided Jessica with any such food that day, leading the police to believe that the meal was provided by the killer. Experts also found no signs of sexual assault, leaving the motive of the perpetrator entirely unclear. Initially, the police began to consider Jessica's parents as suspects, as neither of them had a solid alibi. At the time of Jessica's disappearance, her mother claimed she was packing in the apartment, and the father was shopping. Theoretically, they both had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police tried to understand how the killer managed to take Jessica from her complex's yard without anyone noticing or Jessica screaming. This led them to believe that the perpetrator likely knew the victim well, and she left with him willingly. Another supporting factor was the tone of the killer's voice during the 911 call. Despite the experts' efforts to clean up the recording, they noticed sorrow and regret in the killer's voice, as if they genuinely regretted committing the murder. The fact that the killer took the risk of calling 911 spoke volumes. The perpetrator could have done it either for the thrill of playing with the police and manipulating the investigation, or they genuinely regretted their actions and wanted to somehow alleviate that feeling. Considering the caller's evident sadness, investigators leaned towards the second option. Police inspected Jessica's father's car, finding something intriguing in the trunk. There was a roll of black trash bags similar to the one containing the victim's body. However, an expert examining the bag from the crime scene quickly determined it differed from those found in the father's car, clearly belonging to a different roll. So the man was temporarily ruled out as a suspect, and investigators shifted their focus to others. Forensic experts carefully examined the victim's clothing and body for potential clues, uncovering a few leads. They discovered a substantial amount of dog hair, despite the fact that Jessica's family did not own a dog, suggesting the animal belonged to the killer. Additionally, they found human hair on her body belonging to an unknown white male. However, the experts required a few days to extract the DNA profile. 2 types of foreign fibers were also discovered on Jessica's clothes. Through analysis of their structure, the experts concluded that one likely came from a car seat cover and the other from a carpet, further supporting the theory that the victim was killed elsewhere and transported to the water pumping station by car. Regarding the dog hair found on Jessica's clothing, experts attempted to determine the breed using the FBI's database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from various dog breeds. This database has been helpful in criminal cases where dog hair could be crucial evidence. Experts compared the hair sample with the database, ruling out one breed after another. Ultimately, they concluded that the hair on the victim's clothes belonged to a Shar-Pei. It appears the killer owned a Shar-Pei, and the hair ended up on Jessica's clothes, either in the perpetrator's vehicle or at their residence. According to the preliminary theory of investigators, the killer somehow might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger, and then brought her to his home and murdered her. Meanwhile, the experts attempted to enhance the phone call recording, but it proved to be a challenging task. They decided to try a different approach and sought assistance from NASA. NASA had advanced tools for clearing audio recordings, originally designed to enhance recordings from space. They agreed to help and provided the police with a higher quality audio track. However, the experts still needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare it with the call recording and establish a match. Based on the detectives' assumption that the killer might have known Jessica, they decided to play the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize it. She listened to it for the first time and said that the voice sounded familiar, but the mother couldn't remember whose voice it is. However, during a second attempt, it clicked. She recognized the voice as their neighbor who lived in the same complex, although she couldn't remember his name. She told the detectives that the man often walked his Shar-Pei in the yard. Police swiftly identified the man as 35-year-old James Crow. During the initial hours of Jessica's disappearance, investigators had already questioned him along with other neighbors. He mentioned that he saw her in the yard while walking his dog, and they spoke briefly before he left. Detectives dug into his background and found that Crow had no criminal history. He lived with his wife, who was a nurse. The man was a former truck driver, currently unemployed, and he spent most of his time strolling the streets with a Shar-Pei named Pumpkin. The detectives realized that merely the similarity in voice and owning a dog of a specific breed wasn't enough for an arrest, so they obtained a search warrant for his car. They discovered 2 disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, there was an empty Happy Meal bag, even though Jessica had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach and James didn't have children. This seemed highly suspicious. Experts also noticed that the car had brand new tires, as if they had barely been used. Police found out that Crow replaced them on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous tires were not particularly old and could have lasted for several more years. Crow claimed to have left the old tires at a car service, which was quite unusual considering they were not old at all. So the police headed to this service building, but by the time they arrived, there was only one tire from James's car left. They compared its tread pattern from what was found near the body, but detectives faced an unexpected twist. They didn't match. However, they initially weren't 100% sure that the tire mark on the ground was left by the killer's car and not some other vehicle, as maintenance staff regularly visited the building, and this tire mark could have belonged to their vehicle. The police also searched James's apartment, where they found a new lead, a box containing several rolls of trash bags matching the size and color of the one found on the victim's body. Obviously, this couldn't be considered strong evidence, so detectives had to figure out if there was a way to establish that the bags had come from the same roll. At first glance, this task seemed impossible. The bags themselves had no markings or distinctive features, and there were hundreds of manufacturers of such products. But even the detectives were soon surprised by the creativity they could display in such a complex challenge. They contacted N.L. Roberts, the man responsible for quality control at the company that produced the bags found in the suspect's apartment. At first, he identified the specific factory where the bags were produced, as there was a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls, indicating that the product was made at a facility in Virginia. The expert then explained that a tiny amount of iron or titanium is included in the composition of the bags, depending on their color. Considering that the factory produces bags of various colors, the materials in the production are constantly changing, and the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium literally changes daily, since such tiny amounts cannot be measured with 100% accuracy, and there's no need to do that. In other words, experts could take bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene, measure the presence of the elements in the plastic using high-intensity X-rays, and get a very precise ratio. Through this analysis, they found that the ratio of iron and titanium to plastic in both bags was absolutely identical, indicating that they were manufactured on the same day and should belong to the same batch. But that's not all. During the production of trash bags, a small amount of microscopic debris ends up on the machines, which is acceptable within production standards. However, this results in small streaks visible to the naked eye when the plastic sheets later cut into bags are rolled out. These streaks are present on every bag in large amounts, forming a unique pattern for each roll of fabric. The debris particles on the conveyor belt are constantly moving, falling off and being replaced by new ones, so the pattern of similar streaks is preserved for a maximum of a few hundred feet of fabric. This means that it can be understood from this pattern that two different bags were not just made within the same batch, but within a few hours of each other. Experts compared the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene, and the lines on them matched with astonishing precision. But that's not all. The experts also explained that after the bags are manufactured, they are rolled into a bundle using a machine, which often does this somewhat unevenly. However, if you don't look closely, these deviations are almost imperceptible and the rolls appear smooth. Examining the edges of the bags, however, reveals tiny folds and creases, forming a similarly unique pattern as with the streaks. In the end, the experts compared the bags again and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched the one from the crime scene. They concluded that the bag used by the killer was not just produced by the same company, but was manufactured within a range of almost 17 boxes apart. This meant that with a high degree of probability, the perpetrator took the bag from one of the rolls in James's apartment. Forensic analysts also compared the two types of fibers found on Jessica's clothing with the carpet in the suspect's apartment and the covers of his car seats. Both samples matched. Finally, a sound expert compared the 911 call recording with a voice sample from James and concluded that the voice belonged to the same person. Despite the incredible work done by the experts, detectives faced one major problem. All this fell into the realm of circumstantial evidence. But they were confident in James's involvement and decided to arrest him. The man was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intent to seek the death penalty. Considering that James continued to deny his guilt, the case proceeded to trial. The prosecution presented their version of how the crime happened. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the local kids knew him well. According to the police version, on that day, James noticed Jessica alone on a bench while walking his dog and started a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, promising to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After the restaurant, he presumably took her back to the apartment complex and invited her to his place. Perhaps he offered her to play with Pumpkin, his dog. His wife was at work, and the presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes indicated that she was there on the day of her death. According to investigators, James might have attempted to assault Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the forensic report, the perpetrator not only strangled the victim with his bare hands, but also pressed his palm against her face, perhaps because Jessica tried to scream, and he panicked and attacked her. After Jessica passed away, he placed her in a garbage bag to transport the body to his car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. He drove a few miles and left the body near a water station, made the 911 call from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's lawyers attempted to challenge all available evidence, arguing that there was no solid proof of their client's guilt. Despite the fact that the judge accepted the evidence, the defense was right. In cases involving the death penalty, the standards for evidence are much higher, and in James' case, there was a significant chance of avoiding this sentence. In light of these circumstances, a plea deal was proposed to the suspect. Under the terms of the deal, he would admit guilt to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without parole, thus avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the murder, James agreed to the deal. He wasn't required to disclose any details of the crime, but he mentioned that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family and save them from going through the trial. The prosecution believed that the perpetrator genuinely showed remorse, citing his 911 call, the purpose of which remained unclear. The only logical explanation in this context was that James sincerely wanted to alleviate his guilt for such a heinous crime. Jessica's parents were not pleased with the deal, as they had hoped for the death penalty, and they also wanted the killer to confess. But James remained silent. Nevertheless, he didn't live to see the end of his term. James passed away in November 2011 at the age of 49 due to health problems, taking the details of his actions and motives with him to the grave. Jessica's case involved truly unique work by experts and detectives. The amount of information they gathered by examining ordinary garbage bags astonished even the judge, who had never encountered such evidence throughout his career. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Krista Baker Alexander. Krista Ann Baker Alexander was born on November 27, 1983, in Laurel, Jones County, Mississippi, to Pastor Winfred Baker and Patty Ann Baker. As the youngest child in her family, Krista was raised in a strong Christian household. In 1991, her family moved to Abota Springs, Louisiana, where they built their own church, and Krista became actively involved in its operations, starting her ministry at a young age. Krista accompanied Christian missionary organizations on numerous trips around the world, focusing on serving children and expressing her desire to start a family of her own one day. Meanwhile, she was homeschooled and pursued a degree in Christian education through online courses at North Tennessee Bible Institute. Krista's passion was serving others, especially children, and she longed to start her own family. Though she dreamed of getting married, her faith came first, and she adhered to traditional values, saving herself for marriage and only dating with the intention of marrying. Krista formed lovely friendships, including one with Cootie Alexander, a charismatic youth pastor who shared her passion for missionary work. Through their church, Krista's family became acquainted with Cootie, and they maintained a good relationship. After years of friendship, Cootie asked Krista's father for permission to marry her, and Winfred gladly gave his consent. Before getting married, Cootie and Krista followed church traditions and refrained from intimate contact. Krista confided in her parents that she wanted to share her first kiss with Cootie at the altar. While Krista helped her parents at church, Cootie was pursuing a career as a paramedic. After a year, they decided to get married. On March 1, 2008, they exchanged vows in front of their church community and family members. Krista was overjoyed, and it was a long-awaited day for her. Tragically, just 4 months after the wedding, Krista was found dead on June 29, 2008, at around 6 a.m. Cootie, who had just finished a night shift, returned home to find Krista's lifeless body lying face down on the floor. By the time he found her, she had already passed away. He immediately contacted the police. Krista's body was positioned to the left of the front door, with no visible signs of struggle or trauma. A single bullet wound was found in the back of her head, which experts determined was fired at extremely close range due to burn marks on her skin, suggesting the gun was almost touching her head at the time of the shot. A 9mm shell casing was discovered on the floor beside the body. The investigation hinted at a possible robbery gone wrong, where the perpetrator may have broken into the house believing it was empty, only to encounter Krista and decide to silence her as a witness. Upon examining the premises, signs of a thorough search were evident. A jewelry box had been opened on the bed, the gun cabinet had been broken into, and Krista's purse was found on the kitchen table, with its contents scattered as if the perpetrator was searching for something specific. Many drawers and cabinets were found open, indicating that the perpetrator was seeking something of value. When the police finished searching the house, they needed to speak with everyone who had access to it. The first person they interviewed was Krista's husband, Cootie Alexander. He was visibly distressed and tearful, so the investigators had to wait for him to compose himself before answering their questions. According to Cootie, everything seemed normal the previous night before he left for work. As an EMT with Cadence Ambulance, he worked overnight shifts. During his break, he attempted to contact Krista several times, but she didn't answer her phone. He also sent her multiple text messages, which she failed to respond to. Assuming she was exhausted, Cootie thought she had simply fallen asleep. When he returned home in the morning, he was immediately struck by the fact that the front door of their house was slightly open. Upon entering, he was met with a scene of chaos, with belongings scattered everywhere, and Krista lying on the floor, having suffered a gunshot wound to the head. He checked her pulse, only to confirm that she had passed away. He instantly called the emergency services. The investigators' primary objective was to identify who might have visited the house during Cootie's work hours. It was possible that the perpetrator had taken advantage of Krista's solitude. They also sought to determine whether Krista might have voluntarily let the killer into the house. The lack of signs of struggle, both within the house and on her body, suggested that she may have been familiar with her attacker. This could mean that she did not sense any danger and therefore did not have time to resist. Cootie informed investigators that a rifle and a shotgun were missing from the gun cabinet and disclosed that his wife Krista was 17 weeks pregnant, so he had lost not only his wife, but also their unborn child. He was devastated and unsure how to continue his life. The crime scene appeared suspicious to investigators. The disarray in the house was puzzling. Although cabinets and drawers were open, there was no indication that anyone had searched through them. It seemed as though the perpetrator had intended to mislead the police. Similarly, the jewelry box was open, but the jewelry remained untouched. Krista's purse was open, yet all valuables were still present. Cootie reported that 2 weapons were missing from the house, which seemed strange given that there were more weapons available, but the criminal had selected only 2 for unknown reasons. Investigators wondered why the perpetrator hadn't taken all of them. Considering these inconsistencies, investigators concluded that the crime scene had been staged. It appeared that the perpetrator's primary intention was to take Krista Alexander's life, but had opted to disguise the act as a robbery. The police interviewed the neighbors of the Alexander couple to find potential witnesses, which led to an unexpected discovery. Mavis Rabel, their 69-year-old next-door neighbor and landlord, described the couple as quiet newlyweds who got married in March and were active in the Fundamental Baptist Church. Rabel portrayed Krista Alexander as a kind, helpful, and sweet woman who rarely went outside her tan brick house without her husband. Rabel expressed her shock, saying, "It's just unbelievable that somebody would want to harm her. You just don't expect something like this out here." She last saw the couple on Saturday afternoon when Cootie Alexander was collecting the turtles he had shot in his backyard pond the previous weekend. This information revealed to investigators that Cootie owned a gun, although no gun was found in their home. Cootie reported that the only stolen weapons were a rifle and a shotgun, but he did not mention the gun. Now, the detectives were determined to uncover what Cootie was concealing. They proceeded to the pond area, where they meticulously examined every detail and discovered several 9mm shell casings in the grass. These casings bore a striking resemblance to the one found adjacent to Krista's body. The police subsequently sent all the casings to the state crime lab for a thorough comparison. The resulting report left no room for doubt, unequivocally establishing that the gun Cootie had used to shoot at the turtles was indeed the same weapon used to shoot Krista. The investigators summoned Cootie to the police station for further questioning. He vehemently asserted that it was impossible for him to have shot his wife. According to Cootie, he had left for work at approximately 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 28, 2008, and returned at around 6 a.m. the following day. He claimed that his alibi was solid, as he had been on duty for the entire night. The investigators then spoke with his colleagues, who corroborated Cootie's alibi, confirming that he had spent the entire night at work. When questioned about the gun, Cootie claimed to have owned one, but stated that he had sold it to a stranger named Steve the day before the incident, receiving $500 in cash. However, this account was difficult to verify. Cootie described Steve as a 35-year-old white male, approximately 6'1" tall, who drove an old Toyota pickup truck. Cootie's story was met with skepticism by Krista's parents, who did not believe him. According to Krista's father, Winfred Baker, Cootie showed no emotional response to Krista's death. Moreover, Baker believed that Cootie's detachment began a few months prior to the wedding, when the couple started experiencing financial difficulties while living together, which were further complicated by Krista's pregnancy. Krista's parents informed investigators that they had suspected Cootie of cheating on his wife a few weeks prior to her death. According to Krista's friends, she had believed Cootie was having an affair with a colleague who had even attended their wedding. As the investigators delved deeper into Krista and Cootie Alexander's marriage, they became increasingly convinced that the couple had vastly different visions for their future. However, the question remained whether this disparity was a strong enough motive for Cootie to take the life of the mother of his unborn child. The police only had one lead, a man named Steve, whom Cootie claimed had bought the gun used to shoot Krista. The police launched a manhunt based on Cootie's description, hoping it would aid in the search. Meanwhile, investigators re-questioned Cootie, asking him to provide a detailed account of his activities before work, during his shift, and after returning home. However, his story deviated significantly from his initial statement. This time, he described his activities prior to work, but conveniently omitted mentioning Steve, a man who supposedly visited his house and purchased a gun from him. The investigators found it suspicious that Cootie showed no concern for Krista's well-being when she failed to answer his calls, despite knowing she was pregnant and alone at home. He could have easily asked a family member to check on her, but he didn't. The staged crime scene also raised further doubts about Cootie's innocence. As he struggled to maintain a coherent story, the investigators intensified their questioning to get to the truth. After hours of intense interrogation, Cootie finally admitted to a drastically different story. But was he now telling the truth? He claimed to have fallen asleep on the couch and was awakened late by his wife for his ambulance night shift. He insisted that he wasn't angry with her for waking him up late and that it wasn't an issue. Cootie claimed he had taken a gun to the house, intending to bring it to work to show a colleague who was interested in buying it. He carelessly walked around the house, pointing the gun at things and making click-click noises, pretending to shoot. Cootie then approached Krista from behind, placed the gun to the back of her head, and in that instant, the gun accidentally discharged. He maintained it was an accident and that he never intended to harm her. After realizing Krista was dead, Cootie panicked and was unsure of what to do. He admitted to staging a crime scene to make it look like a robbery, taking items from the house, including weapons and a DVD player, and driving to work. He left the front door open, hoping someone would notice and call the police. However, his plan failed. On his way to work, Cootie said he discarded the pistol and other items, such as his wife's jewelry, out the car window. Upon arriving at work, he only had the DVD player and a Sony radio left in the car. He gave the DVD player to a coworker, Allison Sharp, with whom he confessed to having an affair. Allison Sharp was questioned by investigators and revealed that her relationship with Cootie involved kissing and holding hands before and after his wedding. She claimed that the two had spent a night together at a Baton Rouge hotel. According to Sharp, Cootie took her to the Callaway Inn to help her relax when she was stressed. He paid for a suite with a jacuzzi and even brought china plates from his home to serve a meal with wine. At the time, Krista was away at church camp, and Cootie did not think she would discover his infidelity. Cootie had confessed to having financial struggles, earning only $11 an hour and struggling to pass a test that would have enabled him to earn more. The couple's washing machine was broken. Krista lacked health insurance and was unemployed, and they lived in a rental home despite their financial difficulties. However, Cootie acknowledged that he had found the money to pay for the night with Sharp at the Callaway Inn. Sharp denied any knowledge of Cootie's role in his wife's murder. After investigating, detectives cleared her of any involvement and released her without filing charges. Although Cootie confessed to causing Krista's death, investigators remained skeptical that it was an accident. It seemed suspicious that Cootie was wandering around the house with a gun, pointing it at various objects, and even more alarming that he placed the gun to the back of his pregnant wife's head. The police then focused on finding the murder weapon, which they discovered in the roadside bushes, where Cootie claimed to have discarded it. Ballistics tests confirmed that this gun was indeed the murder weapon. Cootie was subsequently charged with second-degree murder of his wife, first-degree feticide for the death of their unborn child, and obstruction of justice for allegedly staging a burglary at the crime scene. Investigators thought Cootie deliberately committed a crime so he could live with his mistress. He wanted out of his marriage, but his wife Krista was pregnant, and he didn't want to be a parent. Without thinking of the consequences, Cootie decided to get rid of Krista and their unborn child. After Cootie's arrest, Krista's parents, the Bakers, found the strength to forgive him. The family came together to mourn the loss of their baby girl, who would have been their fourth grandchild. Krista's father, Winford, remembered his daughter as a kind person who shared her life and had been on 17 mission trips. Her friends and relatives, close and distant, will remember her fondly. Winford Baker recalled speaking with Cootie shortly before his arrest, saying, "We had a brief conversation before his next interview. We hugged and cried together." Although Winford wants justice to be served, he had already forgiven Cootie even before knowing who was responsible. The only comfort was knowing Krista was in a better place. "She's with the Lord. She's in heaven. She's in a better place," he said. On August 2, 2009, the trial of Cootie Cootie began. Prosecutors argued that Cootie's actions after killing his pregnant wife suggested intentional behavior. They asked, if it was an accident, why didn't he call 911 immediately? Instead, he staged a robbery and left Krista's body for 12 hours before returning from duty and calling 911. Prosecutors also questioned Cootie's claim of an accidental shot, given his experience with weapons, which his father had taught him to handle. Defense attorney Louis Angelby stated that his client was grief-stricken over his wife's death, acknowledging that he made serious mistakes in his subsequent actions. Although Cootie never denied involvement in Krista's death, he deeply loved her, and poor judgment led to his mistakes. Cootie Alexander, 24, suddenly pleaded guilty to second-degree life deprivation of his wife Krista, halting jury deliberations. Prosecutors credited the breakthrough to the victim's family, who agreed to a long-standing plea bargain. In August 2009, the court sentenced Cootie Alexander to 55 years in prison.